On a dusky December evening, Mrs. Elspeth McGillicuddy glimpses a murderer woman strangled on a passing train, her face frozen in terror. No one believes her except Miss Jane Marple, the sharp-eyed spinster of St. Mary Mead. With the help of brilliant housekeeper Lucy Islesborough, they uncover a body hidden in a sarcophagus at Rutherford Hall, a decaying estate riddled with secrets. As the Krakenthorpe family's greed and lies unravel, a charming doctor's deadly ambition emerges, linked to a French dancer's vengeance. From a fleeting train window to a chilling confrontation, Miss Marple weaves a web to trap a killer before another life is lost. Will truth triumph in time? Chapter 1. The train from Paddington, the platform at Paddington. Station bustled with the restless energy of a December afternoon in 1957. Porters wheeled trolleys laden with luggage, their shouts mingling with the hiss of steam and the shrill whistle of departing trains. Mrs. Elspeth McGillicuddy, a sturdy woman in her late 60s with a nonsense air, clutched her worn leather handbag and adjusted her sensible hat. Her cheeks were flushed from the exertion of navigating the Christmas crowds, her arms weighed down by parcels wrapped in brown paper and string. She had spent the day in London, ticking off her shopping list with the precision of a military campaign, and now, at 10 minutes to 5, she was bound for Milchester, where she would spend the night before continuing to St. Mary Mead to visit her old friend. Jane Marple, the 4.50 train to Brackhampton and beyond, stood ready at platform 3, its carriages exhaling faint plumes of steam into the chilly air. Mrs. McGillicuddy, ticket in hand, boarded a second-class compartment near the rear, grateful for the relative quiet. The carriage smelled of damp wool and coal dust, its green upholstery faded but serviceable. She chose a window seat, stowed her parcels on the rack above, and settled in her tweed coat buttoned against the draught. Outside, the platform receded as the train jolted forward, its rhythm steadying into a comforting clackety-clack. The city gave way to suburbs, then to the darkening fields of the home counties, their outlines blurred by a creeping mist. Mrs. McGillicuddy, never one for idle chatter, declined conversation with the only other occupant, a young man engrossed in a racing paper. She opened her copy of the Times, skimming the headlines, but her eyelids grew heavy. The warmth of the carriage, the monotony of the journey, and the fatigue of her day conspired to lull her. Her head nodded, the newspaper slipping to her lap. She might have dozed for minutes or an hour. She could not later say when a sudden jolt roused her. The train had slowed, perhaps at a signal, and through the window she saw the lights of another train running parallel on the adjacent track, its carriages level with her own dot. It was then, in a fleeting, terrible moment, that she saw it. The blind of the opposite carriage was up, the compartment brightly lit, and there, framed as if on a stage, a man stood with his back to the window. His hands were around a woman's throat, squeezing with deliberate force. The woman's face, contorted in terror, was partly visible, her mouth open, her eyes wide with desperation. Her hands clawed at his wrists, but her strength was failing. The scene lasted no more than 3 seconds before the trains diverged, the other carriage sliding out of view as Mrs. McGillicuddy's train picked up speed. Her breath caught, a strangled cry escaping her lips. The young man opposite looked up, startled, his paper rustling. "You all right, ma'am?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. Mrs. McGillicuddy, trembling, pointed at the window. "A murder," she gasped. "I saw it, a man strangling. A woman on that train." The young man peered out, but the other train was gone, swallowed by the dusk. He frowned, scratching his chin. Sure, you weren't dreaming, ma'am. Easy to nod off on these journeys. I was not dreaming, she snapped, her Scottish accent sharpening with indignation. I know what I saw. Her heart pounded, but her practical nature asserted itself. She stood, steadying herself against the sway of the carriage, and made her way to the corridor, determined to find the guard. The train was now rattling through open country, the windows reflecting only her own pale face and the dim lights of the carriage. The guard, a stout man with a walrus moustache, was in the next carriage, checking tickets. She poured out her story, her words tumbling over one another. The guard listened, his expression shifting from polite attention to barely concealed skepticism. Strangling, you say? On the 5.15 from Euston, most like. But we've had no reports, madame. And you didn't see their faces? Mrs. McGillicuddy admitted she had not. The man's back obscuring his features, the woman's face only glimpsed. The guard rubbed his neck. Could have been a bit of horseplay, perhaps, or a trick of the light. Shadows play funny games at dusk. He promised to report it at Brackhampton, but offered little hope. Best not to fret, madame. These things often sort themselves out. Mrs. McGillicuddy returned to her seat, her parcels forgotten, her mind racing. The young man had resumed his paper, casting her curious glances. She stared out at the black countryside, the memory of that awful scene etched in her mind. She was no fanciful girl prone to hysterics. She had seen a murder scene it as clearly as she saw the tea stains on her blouse. Someone must believe her. As the train neared Milchester, she made up her mind. Jane Marple, with her quiet wisdom and uncanny knack for unraveling mysteries, would know what to do. Tomorrow she would go to St. Mary Mead and tell her everything. Chapter 2. Miss Marple's fireside. The village of St. Mary Mead lay tucked in a fold of the downs. Its thatched cottages and tidy gardens bathed in the pale light of a December morning. Dame Mead Cottage, Miss Jane Marple's home, stood at the end of the high street, its whitewashed walls and diamond-paned windows exuding a quiet charm. Inside, the parlour was a haven of comfort, with chintz curtains drawn against the chill and a fire crackling in the grate. The mantelpiece held a clutter of photographs and a single porcelain shepherdess, while a low table bore a silver tray with a teapot, cups, and a plate of scones. Miss Marple, frail and white-haired, sat in her favourite armchair, her knitting, needles clicking softly. Her eyes, bright and bird-like, betrayed a mind as sharp as ever. Despite the fluffy shawl draped over her shoulders, Mrs. Elspeth McGillicuddy arrived at 10:30, her cheeks flushed from the cold and her sensible boots leaving faint traces of frost on the rug. She had taken the early train from Milchester, her mind still reeling from the previous day's horror. The maid, Cherry Baker, ushered her in with a cheerful "She's expecting you, Mrs. M," and took her coat. Miss Marple rose, her smile warm but her gaze already searching her friend's face. "Elspeth, my dear, you look quite shaken. Sit by the fire and tell me everything." Mrs. McGillicuddy sank into the offered chair, her hands twisting the strap of her handbag. Over tea, poured with the precision of long habit, she recounted the incident on the 4.50 from Paddington. Her voice, usually brisk, trembled as she described the man's hands tightening around the woman's throat, the victim's desperate struggle, and the fleeting clarity of the scene before the trains parted. "It was no dream, Jane," she insisted, her Scottish burr sharpening. "I saw it as plain as I see you now. A murder, right there in that carriage." Miss Marple listened without interruption, her needles pausing only to sip her tea. Her face, lined with age, remained serene, but her eyes narrowed slightly, sifting through the details. When Mrs. McGillicuddy finished, her indignation spilling into a tirade against the guard's dismissal, Miss Marple set her knitting aside and leaned forward. "Let us be methodical, Elspeth. You saw the act, but not the faces. The man's back was to you, the woman's features obscured by her struggle." "Correct." Mrs. McGillicuddy nodded, frustrated. "And the carriage, was it first class, second class, or perhaps a private compartment?" Mrs. McGillicuddy frowned, her memory straining. "I couldn't say for certain, Jane. The blind was up, the light bright, but it all happened so quickly. Second class, perhaps, like mine. The other train was running parallel, likely the 5.15 from Euston," the guard said. Miss Marple's lips pursed thoughtfully. "And no one else saw it? Not the young man in your compartment, nor the guard when you reported it?" Mrs. McGillicuddy shook her head, her shoulders sagging. "They thought me a foolish old woman, imagining things." "Nonsense," Miss Marple said briskly, though her tone was kind. "You are the least fanciful person I know, Elspeth. If you say you saw a murder, I believe you. The question is what to do about it." She rose, moving to the window to draw the curtains wider, as if letting in light might clarify the matter. The garden beyond was dusted with frost, the rose bushes pruned for winter. She turned back, her mind already turning over possibilities. A murder on a train, witnessed by chance, suggests a body somewhere along the line. Yet no report has reached the authorities, or we would have heard. Mrs. McGillicuddy sipped her tea, her composure returning under her friend's calm scrutiny. "I thought of going to the police myself, but what could I say? I've no proof, no names, only what I saw. They'd laugh me out of the station." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "The police are often skeptical of what cannot be neatly documented, but they can be persuaded. We must proceed delicately, Elspeth. First, we shall contact the railway authorities to confirm no body or disturbance was reported. Then we must consider where that body might be." She returned to her chair, her fingers resuming their knitting with an absent grace. "Trains, you see, are public yet private. A murderer might act boldly in a compartment, trusting the speed and separation of the carriages to hide his crime. But a body cannot remain on a train indefinitely. It must be disposed of, thrown from the carriage, perhaps, or concealed at a station." Her needles clicked rhythmically, a counterpoint to her thoughts. "The line from Paddington to Brackhampton passes through open country, but also near estates and villages. If the body was thrown out, it might lie undiscovered in a ditch or copse." Mrs. McGillicuddy's eyes widened. "You think the murderer threw her out? But surely someone would have found her by now, a farmer, a gamekeeper." Miss Marple's smile was faint. "Not necessarily. The countryside is vast, and winter hides much. Or the body may have been moved later by someone with access to the area." She paused, her gaze distant. "I recall the line passes close to Rutherford Hall, the Crackenthorpe estate, a large property, somewhat neglected, but with grounds that could conceal a secret." The name stirred a vague memory in Mrs. McGillicuddy, though she could not place it. Rutherford Hall, who lives there? Miss Marple's knowledge of local families, gleaned from years of quiet observation, was encyclopedic. Old Luther. Crackenthorpe, a wealthy but reclusive widower. His children, Nema, Cedric, Harold, and Alfred, visit or reside there intermittently. The estate is sprawling, with woods and a quarry near the railway. An ideal place, perhaps, to hide a body. Her tone was mild, but her eyes were sharp. We must investigate, but discreetly. Mrs. McGillicuddy, though heartened by her friend's resolve, felt a flicker of doubt. Investigate. Jane, we're not detectives. Shouldn't we leave this to the police? Miss Marple's laugh was soft, almost mischievous. The police are admirable, but they require evidence to act. We shall provide it. I have a young friend, Lucy Islesborough, who might assist us. A remarkable girl, Oxford educated, yet she chooses domestic work for its freedom. She has a keen mind and a talent for uncovering secrets. She rose again, moving to a small writing desk in the corner. From a drawer, she withdrew a sheet of notepaper and a fountain pen. I shall write to Lucy at once, asking her to take a position at Rutherford Hall. A housekeeper's role would give her access to the household and grounds. She can observe the family, the staff, and any peculiarities. Her pen scratched. Swiftly, the words precise. I shall also contact my nephew, Raymond West, in London. He has connections at Scotland Yard and can inquire about missing persons or unreported crimes along the line. Mrs. McGillicuddy watched, marveling at her friend's efficiency. You've thought of everything, Jane, but what if there's no body? What if I was mistaken? Miss Marple sealed the letter, her expression unperturbed. Then we shall have troubled no one, and you will have peace of mind. But I do not think you were mistaken, Elspeth. Human nature is predictable, and murder, once committed, leaves traces. We shall find them. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. Miss Marple returned to her chair, her knitting resumed. Now, tell me more about the woman, her clothing, her posture, any detail, however small. Mrs. McGillicuddy closed her eyes, summoning the image. She wore a dark coat, perhaps fur-trimmed, though it was hard to tell. Her hair was light blonde or grey, pinned up. She was slight, not tall. Her hands, she faltered, her voice catching. Her hands were so frantic, clawing at him. She was fighting for her life. Miss Marple nodded, storing the details. A fur-trimmed coat suggests some means, or perhaps foreign-origin European women favour such styles. Blonde or grey hair narrows her age, though not precisely. We shall see what Lucy uncovers. She glanced at the clock, its hands nearing 11. You must stay for lunch, Elspeth. Cherry makes an excellent shepherd's pie, and we shall plan our next steps. Over lunch, served in the small dining room with its faded wallpaper and polished oak table, the conversation turned to lighter matters, village gossip, the vicar's latest sermon, the scandal of Mrs. Price's runaway cat. But Mrs. McGillicuddy sensed the undercurrent of purpose in her friend's manner. Miss Marple, beneath her genteel exterior, was already unraveling the threads of a crime. As they lingered over coffee, Miss Marple outlined her strategy. Lucy will report to me weekly, by letter or telephone. I shall visit Rutherford Hall myself, perhaps as a friend of the family's, to observe the Krakenthorpes. You, Elspeth, must remain alert for any news of missing women in the papers. Mrs. McGillicuddy, fortified by the meal and her friend's confidence, felt a surge of resolve. I'll do whatever you need, Jane. But what if the murderer is still out there? What if he saw me? Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her voice was firm. He did not see you, Elspeth. You were a chance witness, hidden by the speed of the trains. The danger lies at Rutherford Hall, or wherever the body rests. Lucy is resourceful, and I shall ensure she is cautious, as Mrs. McGillicuddy prepared. To leave, her coat retrieved by Cherry, Miss Marple pressed her hand. "You have done right to tell me, Elspeth. We shall bring this matter to light, I promise you." The door closed behind her, and Miss Marple returned to the parlour, her knitting abandoned on the table. She stood by the fire, her gaze fixed on the flames. A murder, seen by chance, was a rare puzzle, but not unsolvable. Human greed, fear, or passion lay at its heart, as always. She thought of the Krakenthorpe family, their wealth and their secrets, and of the unknown woman. Her life snuffed out in a moment of violence. Outside, the village stirred with its daily routines. Trudging to school, the postman making his rounds. But within Danemead Cottage, Miss Marple's mind was far from St. Mary Mead. She saw the railway line, the dark fields, the sprawling grounds of Rutherford Hall. Somewhere, a body waited to be found, and with it, the truth. She picked up her knitting, the needles resuming their steady rhythm, and began to plan. Chapter 3. The Railway Inquiry. The offices of the Southern Railway at Paddington Station were a study in orderly bustle, with clerks shuffling papers and telephones ringing in a muted cacophony. The air carried the faint tang of ink and polished wood, and portraits of stern-faced railway magnates glared down from the walls. Miss Jane Marple, dressed in her best black coat and a hat adorned with a single violet, sat primly in a hard-backed chair, her gloved hands folded over her handbag. Beside her, Mrs. Elspeth McGillicuddy fidgeted, her practical tweed suit a contrast to the polished. It was 2 days after their fireside conference in St. Mary Mead, and Miss Marple had insisted on a personal visit to the railway authorities to pursue Mrs. McGillicuddy's account of the murder on the 4.50 train. The official assigned to their case, Mr. Herbert Grayson, was a lean man in his 50s, with a perpetually furrowed brow and spectacles perched low on his nose. His desk was a fortress of ledgers and timetables, and he regarded the two women with the weary patience of one accustomed to public complaints. "Mrs. McGillicuddy," he began, consulting a notepad, "you claim to have witnessed a strangling on a train running parallel to the 4.50 from Paddington on December 20th. Is that correct?" His tone suggested he had heard many such tales, few of them credible. Mrs. McGillicuddy bristled, her Scottish accent sharpening. "It's not a claim, Mr. Grayson. I saw a man throttling a woman in a lit compartment. It was no dream or fancy, and I'll not be told otherwise." Her cheeks flushed, and she gripped her handbag as if it might anchor her indignation. Miss Marple laid a gentle hand on her friend's arm, her smile serene but her eyes fixed on Grayson with quiet intensity. "Mr. Grayson," Miss Marple said, her voice soft yet precise, "my friend is a woman of sound judgment, not given to imaginings. She saw a crime, and we are here to ensure it is investigated. Might you tell us what inquiries have been made since her report to the guard?" Her tone was deferential, but there was a steel beneath it that made Grayson straighten. Slightly, he cleared his throat, flipping through his notes. "The guard on the 4.50, a Mr. Perkins, did file a report, as required. We checked with the crew of the 5.15 from Euston, the train most likely running parallel at the time. No disturbances were noted. No passengers reported missing, no compartments found in disarray. We also contacted stations along the route, Brackhampton, Milchester, and so forth. No bodies, no suspicious items. I'm afraid, Mrs. McGillicuddy, there's no evidence to support your account." Mrs. McGillicuddy's lips tightened, but before she could retort, Miss Marple interposed. "No evidence yet, Mr. Grayson. A body is not easily disposed of on a moving train. yet it cannot remain aboard indefinitely. Have the tracks been searched, particularly between Paddington and Brackhampton, where the trains were parallel? Her question was posed with the mild curiosity of an elderly aunt, but her eyes never left his face. Grayson hesitated, adjusting his spectacles. The tracks are inspected daily for maintenance, Miss Marple, but not specifically for bodies. Such a search would require significant resources, men, time, and coordination with the police. Without corroboration, we cannot justify it. He spread his hands, as if the matter were settled. It's possible you saw something else at Quarrel, perhaps, or a theatrical gesture mistaken for violence. Shadows and speed can deceive. Miss Marple's smile did not waver, but her knitting, which she had produced from her bag, paused. Briefly, shadows and speed, Mr. Grayson, do not strangle. My friend saw a woman fighting for her life. If no body has been found, it suggests the murderer acted quickly to conceal his crime. Might we know the exact route of the 5.15 from Euston, and the points where it ran closest to the 4.50? Her needles resumed their rhythm, a soft counterpoint to her words. Grayson, sensing her persistence, sighed and opened a timetable. The 5.15 follows the main line through Westbourne Park, Acton and Ealing, converging briefly with the 4.50 near Hanwell, about 10 miles out. The tracks are close, they're perhaps 20 yards apart, before diverging again. Beyond that, the 4.50 slows near Brackhampton, while the 5.15 continues to Reading. He tapped the page. If something was thrown from the 5.15, it would likely be near Hanwell or Brackhampton, but the terrain is open fields, mostly, with some wooded patches. A body would have been noticed by now. Unless, Miss Marple murmured, almost to herself, it was not meant to be noticed. She leaned forward, her voice gentle but probing. Tell me, Mr. Grayson, are there private estates or large properties near the line where a body might be concealed? I recall Rutherford Hall, the Crackenthorpe estate, lies close to the tracks. Near Brackhampton, her mention of the name was casual, but her eyes flicked to his reaction. Grayson nodded, unaware of the trap. Rutherford Hall, yes. The grounds border the line for half a mile or so, just before Brackhampton, but the Crackenthorpes are a respectable family old money, though the place is run down. Surely you're not suggesting? He trailed off, his brow furrowing anew. I suggest nothing, Mr. Grayson, Miss Marple said, her tone placating. I merely observe that a large estate offers privacy, and privacy suits a murderer's needs. Might you provide us with a map of the line showing Rutherford Hall and the surrounding area? It would ease my friend's mind to know the matter is being thoroughly explored. Her request was framed as a favor, but Grayson sensed he could not easily refuse. He rose, retrieving a folded map from a cabinet. Spreading it across his desk, he traced the route with a pencil, marking the convergence near Hanwell and the proximity of Rutherford Hall. Here, he said, circling a patch of green, the estates, woods, and quarry are adjacent to the tracks. But I must stress, ladies, we've no grounds to search private property without police involvement. He handed the map to Miss Marple, who tucked it into her bag with a murmured thank you. Mrs. McGillicuddy, who had been silent during this exchange, could contain herself no longer. And what of the police? Surely they should be told. A woman is dead, Mr. Grayson, and you talk of timetables and maps. Her voice rose, drawing a glance from a passing clerk. Miss Marple patted her hand, her touch calming. Elspeth, we shall inform the police, but we must be strategic. Mr. Grayson has been most helpful, and this map will guide us. She turned to Grayson, her expression earnest. "One final question. Sir, have any passengers from the 5.15 been reported missing since December 20th, even informally?" A friend, a relative inquiring. Her question was a delicate probe, testing for cracks in the official record. Grayson shook his head. "None, Miss Marple. Our records are clear. If a passenger had vanished, we'd have heard. Families are quick to raise the alarm." He stood, signaling the interview's end. "I'll pass your concerns to our security officer, but I cannot promise more without evidence. I wish you both a good day." As they left the office, Mrs. McGillicud's frustration boiled over. "The man's as stubborn as a mule, Jane. No body, no evidence, no action. What now?" They stepped onto the platform, where the clamour of an arriving train drowned her words. Miss Marple guided her to a bench, her face thoughtful. "Now, Elspeth, we act where they cannot. The railway has no body, but we know one exists. The murderer, I suspect, removed it from the train, likely near Rutherford Hall, where the tracks skirt the estate. We need eyes and ears in that household." She opened her bag, withdrawing a letter. "I wrote to Lucy Islesborough yesterday, and she has agreed to take a position at Rutherford Hall as housekeeper. She starts tomorrow." Mrs. McGillicuddy blinked, momentarily diverted. Lucy Islesborough, the Oxford girl who cleans houses. Why, she could be running a college. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Precisely, Lucy is brilliant, discreet, and fearless. She will observe the Crackenthorpes, their staff, their visitors, anyone who might know of a body hidden on the grounds. She will also explore the quarry and woods, where I suspect our victim lies." They rose, walking toward the station exit. Where a cold wind swept through the arches, Miss Marple continued, her voice low. "I have also written to my nephew, Raymond West. He will speak to Inspector Craddock at Scotland Yard, a most capable man, and inquire about missing women matching your description, light-haired, perhaps foreign, wearing a dark coat. If no one has reported her missing, it suggests she was alone, perhaps a stranger to these parts." Mrs. McGillicuddy nodded, her confidence in her friend growing. "And what shall I do, Jane? I feel useless, sitting about while you and Lucy do all the work." Miss Marple's smile was warm. "You, Elspeth, will keep your eyes on the newspapers, local and national, for any mention of missing women or unusual discoveries near Brackhampton. You will also stay with me in St. Mary Mead until Lucy reports. Your memory of that moment is our foundation, and I may need you to recall further details." They parted at the station, Mrs. McGillicuddy catching a train back to Milchester to collect her things, while Miss Marple boarded a local for St. Mary Mead, alone in her compartment. Miss Marple unfolded the railway map, her eyes tracing the line near Rutherford Hall, the Crackenthorpe estate, with its tangled woods and disused quarry loomed large in her mind. She thought of Luther Crackenthorpe, a miserly patriarch, and his children, each with their own ambitions and resentments. A body on their land implied a connection, perhaps a family secret, a hidden motive. Back in Danemead Cottage that evening, Miss Marple sat by her fire, the map spread on her lap. Cherry brought tea, her chatter about the village fete ignored as Miss Marple's thoughts turned inward. A murder on a train was audacious, requiring nerve and opportunity. The killer had acted swiftly, trusting the train's speed to shield him, but he had not counted on a witness. The body, she reasoned, had been thrown from the carriage during that brief convergence near Hanwell or Brackhampton. landing in the undergrowth of Rutherford Hall. Someone, perhaps a Krakenthorpe, perhaps a stranger, had moved it, hiding it in a place only familiarity would suggest. She picked up her knitting, the needles clicking as her mind worked. Lucy Islesborough would be her eyes, her proxy in a household rife with tension. The Krakenthorpes she knew from village talk were a fractured lot. Emma, dutiful but strained. Cedric, the wayward artist. Harold, the pompous financier. Alfred, the dubious opportunist. And there was Dr. Quimper, the family physician, whose frequent visits to Rutherford Hall hinted at more than professional duty. Miss Marple's instincts, honed by years of observing human nature, whispered of greed or passion at the heart of this crime. As the fire dwindled, she set her knitting aside and wrote a second letter to Lucy, enclosing the railway map and precise instructions to watch for signs of disturbance in the quarry, to note any Krakenthorpe's reaction to the railway line, and to befriend Emma, who might reveal a family secret. "You are my knight, Lucy," she wrote, "but a knight must be cautious. Trust no one until we know more." Sealing the letter, Miss Marple gazed into the flames, her frail frame belying the tenacity within. A woman was dead, her story silenced, but not for long. In St. Mary Mead, as in the wider world, Miss Marple knew that truth, like a buried seed, would surface in time. Chapter 4. Rutherford hauled the train from Paddington to Brackenton, chugged through the frosty December landscape, its wheels clattering a steady rhythm as Lucy Islesborough gazed out at the passing fields. She was a striking woman in her early 30s, with clear grey eyes, a determined chin, and an air of quiet competence that belied her Oxford degree in mathematics. Her suitcase, neatly packed, rested on the rack above, containing practical clothes suited to her new role as housekeeper at Rutherford Hall. Miss Marple's letter, tucked into her handbag, had been clear. Infiltrate the Krakenthorpe household. Observe its inhabitants, and search the estate grounds for any trace of a body linked to Mrs. McGillicuddy's train-borne vision of murder. Lucy, who thrived on challenges, felt a thrill of anticipation. Domestic work, far from diminishing her, offered freedom to move unnoticed, to listen, to see. Rutherford Hall loomed into view as the taxi from Brackhampton station wound through narrow lanes bordered by bare hedgerows. The Georgian mansion, once grand, now sagged under neglect, its stone facade streaked with moss, its windows dull with grime. The grounds, sprawling and unkempt, stretched toward a line of woods where the railway tracks glinted in the distance. Lucy noted the proximity of the line, recalling Miss Marple's map and her suspicion that a body might have been thrown from a train onto this very estate. The driver, a garrulous local, offered unsolicited commentary. Krakenthorpes ain't what they were. Old Luther's a miser, hoarding his gold while the place crumbles. Mind yourself, miss, they're a queer lot. At the front door, a heavy oak affair studded with iron, Lucy was met by Emma Krakenthorpe, a woman in her late 40s with a kind but careworn face. Her brown hair was neatly pinned, but faint lines around her eyes spoke of strain. "Miss Islesborough, I'm Emma Krakenthorpe. We're so grateful you've come. The house is rather demanding." Her voice was soft, with a hint of apology, as she led Lucy into a cavernous hall. The air was chilly, the parquet floor scuffed, and a grand staircase curved upward into shadow. Portraits of stern Krakenthorpe ancestors lined the walls, their gazes judgmental. Lucy, with her practiced efficiency, assessed her surroundings. "I'm used to demanding houses, Miss Krakenthorpe. I'll manage." Her smile was warm, disarming, and Emma relaxed slightly. "Please, call me Emma. Let me show you the kitchen and your room." As they walked, Lucy noted the signs of decay, peeling wallpaper, a chandelier missing half its crystals, a faint musty smell. The kitchen, though large, was outdated, its range temperamental and its pantry Lucy's mind, already cataloguing tasks, saw opportunity busyness would grant her access to every corner of the house and grounds. Emma introduced the staff: Mrs. Kidder, a part-time cook with a penchant for gossip; Tom, a sullen gardener who doubled as handyman; and Annie, a young maid prone to daydreaming. Lucy, adept at winning trust, chatted easily with them, her questions light but probing. Mrs. Kidder, kneading dough, was quick to share. "It's a gloomy place, Miss. Mr. Luther's always grumbling, and the family's at odds. Miss Emma does her best, but them brothers, well, they're trouble, mark my words." Lucy filed the comment away, her interest piqued. Her room, on the top floor, was small but adequate, with a view of the woods and the railway line beyond. Alone, she unpacked, placing Miss Marple's letter in a locked diary. The instructions were precise. Observe the Crackenthorpe's routines, note any unease about the railway, and explore the grounds, particularly the quarry and woods, for signs of disturbance. Lucy, who had once unearthed a smuggling ring while organizing a manners library, felt equal to the task. She changed into a practical skirt and blouse, tied an apron, and set to work, her first day a whirlwind of cleaning, inventory, and subtle inquiry. Rutherford Hall, she quickly learned, was a house of tensions, its occupants bound by habit and resentment. Luther Crackenthorpe, the patriarch, was a wiry man in his late 70s, with a sharp tongue and a paranoid obsession with his wealth. He spent his days in a cluttered study, poring over ledgers or railing against his children's supposed greed. At dinner, served in a dining room with faded damask curtains, Lucy observed him closely. "This soup's thin," he snapped, glaring at Emma. "You're letting that new woman waste my money, aren't you?" Emma's reply was patient, but her hands trembled slightly as she passed the bread. The brothers, present that evening, were a study in contrasts. Cedric, the eldest, was a dishevelled artist in his 50s, with a booming laugh and a disdain for convention. He lived in a cottage on the estate, painting abstract canvases that Luther derided as daubs. "You'll get nothing from me." "Boy," Luther growled when Cedric mentioned repairs to his roof. Cedric shrugged, winking at Lucy as if to say he was used to it. Harold, a banker in his late 40s, was stiff and pompous, his suit immaculate but his eyes cold. He visited rarely, his presence a reminder of London's financial world, which Luther distrusted. "The estate's a liability, father," Harold said, his voice clipped. "You should sell." Luther's retort was a snarl, and Lucy noted Harold's clenched jaw. Alfred, the youngest at 40, was the most elusive, a lean man with a slick charm that felt calculated. He arrived late, smelling faintly of gin, and his conversation danced around his activities' vague references to business in London. Lucy, serving the roast, caught his appraising glance, which she met with a bland smile. Dr. John Quimper, the family physician, completed the table. A handsome man in his early 50s, with greying temples and a soothing manner. He attended Luther's ailments and lingered to chat with Emma. His attentiveness, Lucy thought, bordered on proprietary, and Emma's shy responses suggested a bond, though whether romantic or merely kind, Lucy could not yet tell. After dinner, as the family dispersed Luther to his study, Cedric, to his cottage. Harold and Alfred to the drawing room for brandy. Lucy cleared the table, her ears attuned to snippets of conversation. Emma, helping in the kitchen, confided softly, "It's not always like this, Miss Islesborough. Father's moods, they wear on us." Lucy, washing plates, nodded sympathetically. "Families can be trying. Do the brothers visit often?" Emma hesitated, then said, "Cedric's here most days. Alfred comes and goes. Harold only when he must. They don't agree on much." Her voice held a note of sadness, and Lucy sensed a deeper story, one she would coax out in time. Her real work began the next day, under the guise of household duties. Armed with a basket of cleaning supplies, Lucy explored the sprawling grounds, her route taking her past the woods and toward the railway line. The tracks, visible through a gap in the trees, ran parallel to a disused quarry, its edges overgrown with brambles. Miss Marple had flagged the quarry as a likely hiding place, and Lucy, with her knack for noticing details, scanned the terrain. The ground was uneven, littered with leaves and twigs, but something caught her eye: a patch of disturbed earth near a cluster of thorns, as if something heavy had been dragged. Kneeling, she brushed aside debris and found a scrap of fabric, dark and slightly matted, its texture suggesting fur. It was out of place among the natural litter, and her pulse quickened. She tucked it into her apron, resolving to send it to Miss Marple for comparison with Mrs. McGillicud's description of the victim's coat. Back at the house, Lucy's efficiency won grudging approval. Mrs. Kidder, thawing under her charm, shared more gossip. That Dr. Quimper's always about, fussing over Miss Emma. Reckon he's sweet on her. But Luther won't have it, says. No one's getting his money. Lucy, polishing silver, asked casually, "Does the doctor live nearby?" Mrs. Kidder snorted, "Got a practice in Brackhampton, but you'd think he lives here, the time he spends. Mind, he's a good doctor, keeps old Luther going." Lucy nodded, her mind noting Quimper's access to the estate and his influence over Emma. That evening, as she served tea in the drawing room, Lucy observed the family dynamics anew. Luther, ensconced in a wing-back chair, grumbled about taxes, his eyes darting suspiciously at Alfred, who lounged by the fire. Cedric, paint-stained and cheerful, teased Harold about his city ways, earning a frosty glare. Emma, pouring tea, seemed to mediate silently, her glances calming tempers. Quimper, arriving late to check Luther's heart, stayed for a cup, his conversation with Emma warm but guarded. Lucy, moving silently, caught a fleeting look between Alfred and Quimper, flicker of understanding, quickly masked. It was subtle, but Lucy's instincts, sharpened by past investigations, marked it as significant. Later, alone in her room, Lucy wrote to Miss Marple, enclosing the scrap of fabric in a small envelope. "The household is fractious," she reported. "Luther's wealth the root of much discord. The quarry shows signs of disturbance, and the fabric may be a clue. Dr. Quimper's presence is notable. He seems close to Emma, yet I sense calculation. Alfred, too, bears watching. His manner suggests secrets." She sealed the letter, her thoughts turning to the railway line, so close, yet so hidden by the estate's sprawl. The body, if it existed, was here. She felt it in her bones. Over the next days, Lucy settled into a routine, her efficiency masking her true purpose. She reorganized the pantry, mended curtains, and won Emma's trust with small kindnesses. She also ventured further into the grounds, her walks taking her to the wood's edge, where the railway's hum was a constant presence. The quarry, she noted, was rarely visited, its paths overgrown, its silence heavy. Once she glimpsed Tom, the gardener, near the tracks, his expression furtive as he carried a sack. When she asked him about it, he muttered about clearing rubbish, but his eyes avoided hers. Lucy added him to her mental list, though she suspected his unease stemmed from minor pilfering, not murder. Emma, increasingly confiding, revealed fragments of the family's past. "Father's will ties the estate to us," she said one afternoon as they sorted linens. "None of us can inherit unless we stay here, and even then, it's complicated. He thinks we're all after his money." Her voice was weary, and Lucy, folding a sheet, asked gently, "Does it cause much trouble?" Emma sighed. "More than you'd think. Cedric doesn't care, but Harold and Alfred, they're always scheming." She stopped, as if fearing she'd said too much, and Lucy did not press by the week's end. Lucy had mapped the household's rhythms and the estate's hidden corners. The scrap of fabric, the disturbed earth, and the family's undercurrents all pointed to a secret tied to the railway. She felt Miss Marple's presence in her mind, urging caution but also boldness. The Crackenthorpes, she sensed, were a tinderbox, and the murder, if it was here, would spark truths they could not contain. As she lay in her narrow bed, the distant whistle of a train echoing through the night, Lucy resolved to dig deeper, her mathematician's logic aligning with her sleuth's. Instinct, Rutherford Hall held its secrets tightly, but she would prize them free. Chapter 5. The body in the sarcophagus. The winter sun hung low over Rutherford Hall, casting long shadows across the frost-crusted lawns as Lucy Islesborough moved with her usual brisk efficiency. 10 days had passed since her arrival, and she had settled into the household's rhythm, her sharp mind cataloguing every detail while her hands polished silver or scrubbed floors. The Crackenthorpe family, with their tangled resentments and guarded secrets, had grown accustomed to her presence, their wariness dulled by her apparent diligence. Yet Lucy's true purpose, prompted by Miss Marple's directive to uncover evidence of a murder linked to Mrs. McGillicuddy's vision on the 4.50 from Paddington, burned steadily beneath her domestic facade. The scrap of fur she had found near the quarry, now sent to Miss Marple, was a tantalizing clue. But she needed more. Her mornings were spent managing the household, her afternoons exploring the estate under the guise of errands or exercise. The railway line, a constant hum beyond the woods, drew her attention daily, its proximity to the quarry reinforcing Miss Marple's theory that a body had been thrown from a train. The Crackenthorpes, too, were under scrutiny. Luther's paranoia, Emma's quiet strain, Cedric's careless defiance, Harold's cold ambition, Alfred's slippery charm, and Dr. Quimper's calculated warmth all suggested motives that might intersect with murder. Lucy's letter to Miss Marple, sent 3 days prior, had detailed these observations, along with her suspicion that the quarry held more than brambles. Today, she resolved to investigate a neglected corner of the estate, a crumbling barn near the woods, rarely visited but close to the railway. The barn, a sagging structure of weathered timber, stood at the edge of the estate, its roof half collapsed, and its doors warped. Luther had mentioned it once, dismissing it as a relic from his grandfather's time, filled with junk no one bothered to clear. Lucy, armed with a pretext of checking for salvageable tools, approached it after lunch, when the household was quiet. Emma was in Brackhampton shopping, Luther napped in his study, and the brothers were absent, Cedric painting, Harold in London, Alfred off on vague business. Dr. Quimper had not visited, and the staff, busy with their tasks, paid her no mind. The air was sharp, her breath visible as she crossed the frosty grass. A lantern and crowbar tucked into her basket. The barn's interior was dim, smelling of mold and old straw. Shafts of light pierced the broken roof, illuminating piles of rusted farm tools, splintered crates, and cobwebbed furniture. Lucy moved methodically, her eyes scanning for anything out of place. Near the back, half hidden by a tarp, stood the object that made her pause, a massive stone sarcophagus, its surface carved with faded glyphs. It was an oddity, out of place among the rural debris, and she recalled Emma's mention of their great-grandfather's travelser, collector of antiquities, who had brought this relic from Egypt. The lid, slightly askew, suggested it had been opened recently, and Lucy's pulse quickened. If a body had been hidden, this was a perfect tomb. Setting her lantern on a crate, she gripped the crowbar and tested the lid. It was heavy, but the gap allowed leverage, and with a grunt, she pried it further open. A stale, sour odor wafted out, distinct from the barn's mustiness. Bracing herself, she peered inside. There, wrapped in a tattered coat, lay a woman's body, her face pale and bruised, her neck marked by dark fingerprints. The sight, though expected, jolted Lucy, her mathematician's logic clashing with the visceral reality of death. The woman's hair, light blonde or grey, was pinned loosely, and her coat dark, with a fur collar matched Mrs. McGillicud's description. Lucy's hand brushed the fabric, confirming it resembled the scrap from the quarry. This was no coincidence. She stepped back, her mind racing. The body had been moved here, likely from the railway's edge, to a place few would look. The sarcophagus, forgotten by the family, was a clever hiding spot, but not foolproof. Someone had been careless, leaving the lid ajar. Lucy's first instinct was to fetch the police, but Miss Marple's caution echoed. Gather evidence, avoid alerting the killer. She examined the scene, noting the coat's cheap fabric, a single earring dangling from the woman's ear, and a scuff on the barn floor, as if something had been dragged. She replaced the lid carefully, ensuring it looked undisturbed, and left the barn, her basket heavier with the weight of her discovery. Back at the house, Lucy maintained her composure, directing Annie to polish the staircase and conferring with Mrs. Kidder about dinner. Her thoughts, however, were with the sarcophagus. She needed to inform Miss Marple and the authorities, but timing was critical. The killer, if a Krakenthorpe or someone close, might suspect interference if she acted too quickly. She slipped into her room and wrote a coded note to Miss Marple. Using their agreed-upon cipher, found antique in barn, matches your description. Awaiting instructions. She would post it in Brackhampton tomorrow, ensuring no one at Rutherford Hall saw it. That evening, the family gathered for dinner, and Lucy, serving the meal, observed them with heightened awareness. Luther, querulous as ever, complained about the cost of coal, his eyes darting suspiciously at Emma. "You're letting that housekeeper run riot, girl. Mark my words, she's fleecing us." Emma, pale but composed, murmured a defense, her hands steady as she cut her meat. Cedric, slouched in his chair, grinned at Lucy, unbothered by his father's tirade. "She's a gem, father. House hasn't been this clean in years." Harold, present for the weekend, sipped his wine, his silence louder than words. Alfred, arriving late, was unusually subdued, his charm dimmed by a nervous edge. Dr. Quimper, invited at Emma's insistence, exuded calm, his anecdotes about Brackhampton. Patience easing the tension. Lucy, clearing plates, noted their interactions. Alfred's glances at Quimper, fleeting but pointed, suggested a shared secret, though whether it involved the body she could not yet say. Emma's deference to Quimper, tinged with warmth, hinted at trust, perhaps affection, but her eyes held a flicker of unease when Luther mentioned the estate's future. "No one's getting this place while I live," he growled, slamming his fist. "You're all vultures, waiting for my corpse." The words hung heavy, and Lucy, retreating to the kitchen, wondered if another corpse already lay in wait. The next morning, she took the early bus to Brackhampton, posting her letter and telephoning Miss Marple from a public booth. The connection was faint, but Miss Marple's voice, crisp despite her age, cut through. "You've done well, Lucy. Do not touch the barn again. I'm coming tomorrow as your aunt to visit Emma. Alert Inspector Craddock Raymond has primed. Him, say, you found the body while cleaning, nothing more." Lucy agreed, her respect for Miss Marple's precision growing. Back at Rutherford Hall, she resumed her duties, her calm exterior masking her alertness. By midday, the discovery could no longer be delayed. Lucy, feigning a routine check of the barn for leaks, enlisted Tom to help move crates, ensuring a witness. When they reached the sarcophagus, she accidentally nudged the lid, gasping. As the body was revealed, Tom, pale and stammering, ran for Emma, who summoned the police. Inspector Dermot Craddock, a lean man with a deceptively mild manner, arrived within the hour, his team cordoning off the barn. The household gathered in the drawing room, their faces a mix of shock and suspicion. Craddock, briefed by Miss Marple via Raymond West, questioned Lucy first, accepting her story of a chance discovery. "You've a sharp eye, Miss Islesborough," he said, his tone probing but kind. "Anything else you noticed in the barn?" Lucy, sticking to her script, mentioned only the disturbed floor, letting Craddock draw his own conclusions. He examined the body, noting the strangulation marks and the coat's fur trim, which matched Mrs. McGillicuddy's account. The woman, he estimated, had been dead 2 weeks, her identity unknown, but her clothes suggesting modest means, possibly foreign. "Likely moved here after the killing," he murmured to his sergeant. "Someone knew this barn." The Crackenthorpes were interviewed in turn, their responses revealing more about their characters than their alibis. Luther, outraged at the intrusion, claimed ignorance of the barn's contents. "I haven't set foot there in years. It's that woman's fault, poking about." Emma, shaken, admitted the sarcophagus was a family heirloom, untouched since her childhood. "Who would do this?" she whispered, her eyes searching Craddock's face. Cedric, lounging defiantly, scoffed at the idea of a connection. "Some tramp, probably. People sneak onto the estate all the time." Harold, stiff and formal, insisted he was in London on December 20th, his tone daring contradiction. Alfred, sweating despite the cold, muttered about vagrants and avoided Craddock's gaze. Quimper, calm but watchful, vouched for his medical rounds, his presence at the house, frequent but accounted for. Lucy, serving tea to the shaken family, caught their under Alfred's nervousness, Quimper's measured calm, and Emma's distress suggested layers of truth yet to be peeled back. When Miss Marple arrived the next day, posing as Lucy's aunt, her frail figure and fluffy shawl disarmed the household. Emma, welcoming her, apologized for the uproar. "Such a dreadful thing, Miss Marple. I can't think how it happened." Miss Marple, sipping tea, murmured sympathies, her eyes darting to the sarcophagus, visible through the barn's open door. "A terrible shock, my dear. But Lucy mentioned the coat fur-trimmed, was it? so like the one Elspeth described. Her words, seemingly idle, landed like a stone in a pond. Lucy, standing by, saw Quimper's hand tighten on his cup, Alfred's head jerk up, and Emma's brow furrow. Miss Marple continued knitting, her face bland, but her glance to Lucy was clear. The fur was the key. Craddock, joining them, questioned Miss Marple politely, accepting her presence as a coincidence. "You've a knack for being in the right place, ma'am," he said, his eyes twinkling. Miss Marple's smile was demure. "Merely visiting. My niece, Inspector, but that coat most distinctive. I trust you'll trace its owner." As the police continued their work, photographing the body and searching the barn, Lucy and Miss Marple conferred in her room. "The body was moved, Lucy," Miss Marple said, her voice low. "The killer used the train's speed to hide the act, then the estate's seclusion to hide the evidence. Someone here knows that sarcophagus." Lucy nodded, producing the scrap of fur from her diary. "It matches, Miss Marple, and the drag marks suggest it came from the quarry near the tracks." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. "Good. The killer is close perhaps. A Crackenthorpe, perhaps another with access. Watch Quimper and Alfred. Their reactions betray them." The day ended with the body removed to the morgue, the barn sealed, and the household in disarray. Lucy, lying awake, heard the distant train whistle, its sound now ominous. The sarcophagus had yielded its secret, but the killer remained at large. Their motive tied to the estate's wealth or a deeper betrayal. Miss Marple's presence, like a quiet beacon, steadied her. Tomorrow they would tighten the net, using the fur, the family's fears, and Craddock's diligence to unmask a murderer who thought their crime buried forever. Chapter 6. The family's secrets, the discovery of the body in the sarcophagus, had cast a pall over Rutherford Hall, its once quiet corridors now humming with unease. The police, led by Inspector Dermot Craddock, maintained a steady presence, their questions probing the Crackenthorpe family's routines and alibis. Lucy Islesborough, ever the efficient housekeeper, moved through her duties with a calm that belied her heightened alertness. The body a woman, strangled, her fur-trimmed coat matching Mrs. McGillicuddy's description, had confirmed Miss Marple's suspicions of a murder linked to the 4.50 from Paddington. Yet the killer remained at large, their identity hidden within the tangled web of the Crackenthorpe household. Lucy, guided by Miss Marple's instructions, watched for cracks in the family's facades, her sharp mind sifting every word and glance. The morning after Miss Marple's visit, Lucy rose early, the frosty air seeping through her attic window. The house was silent, save for the distant clatter of Mrs. Kidder in the kitchen. Lucy's latest letter from Miss Marple, delivered discreetly by post, urged her to focus on the family's motives. Money or love, Lucy, drives most murders. The Crackenthorpes are bound by Luther's wealth, but secrets bind them tighter. Press gently, and they will betray themselves. With this in mind, Lucy planned her day, balancing household tasks with subtle inquiries. The police investigation, while thorough, lacked the intimate knowledge she and Miss Marple could wield. Breakfast in the dining room was a tense affair. The family gathered under the weight of recent events. Luther Crackenthorpe, his thin frame, hunched over porridge, muttered darkly about police trampling his estate. "They'll ruin me," poking into every corner. "It's that woman's fault, you precious housekeeper, Emma." His voice was venomous, but Emma, seated opposite, responded with weary patience. "Lucy found the body, father. She couldn't ignore it. The police will find the truth." Her tone was steady, but her fingers twisted a napkin, betraying her. "Strain." Cedric, slouched in a paint-stained sweater, scoffed, his usual bravado undimmed. "Truth, some vagrant got herself killed, and now we're all suspects. Ridiculous." He helped himself to toast, ignoring his father's glare. Harold, immaculate in a pinstriped suit, sipped coffee in silence, his face a mask of disdain. Alfred, nursing a headache from the previous night's brandy, was uncharacteristically quiet, his eyes darting to the door as if expecting interruption. Dr. Quimper, present to check Luther's blood pressure, offered soothing platitudes, his charm a counterpoint to the family's discord. "The police are doing their job, Luther. Best to cooperate." His glance at Emma was warm, but Lucy, serving eggs, noted a flicker of calculation in his eyes. As she cleared plates, Lucy seized an opportunity to probe. "It must be unsettling, Miss Emma, having the police here," she said, her tone sympathetic. "Do you think the poor woman was local?" Emma hesitated, her eyes meeting Lucy's briefly. I can't imagine. No one's gone missing in Brackhampton, or we'd have heard. She must have been a stranger." Her voice faltered, and Lucy, sensing a hidden weight, pressed gently. "Perhaps someone passing through. Then, the railway's so close." Emma's nod was distracted, and Lucy withdrew, aware she had touched a nerve. Craddock's interviews, conducted in the library, revealed the family's fractures more clearly. Lucy, tasked with bringing tea, lingered outside the door, her tray a pretext for eavesdropping. Luther, first to be questioned, was belligerent, insisting he rarely left his study and knew nothing of the barn. "That sarcophagus is junk been there since my grandfather's day. Whoever put that woman there, it's nothing to do with me." His voice carried a defensive edge, and Craddock's calm follow-up, "You're certain no one's been near?" "The barn recently," drew only a grunt. Emma, next, was more forthcoming but guarded. "I walk the grounds sometimes, Inspector, but not to the barn. It's too far, and neglected. I can't think why anyone would hide a body there." Her mention of anonymous letters, received weeks earlier, caught Lucy's attention. They were typed, warning me to beware the estate. I thought them a prank, but now Craddock's interest sharpened, and he asked to see them. Emma promised to search her desk, her voice trembling. Lucy, retreating with her tray, wondered if the letters pointed to the killer or a separate scheme. Cedric's interview was predictably defiant. "I'm in my cottage, or the woods, painting. Don't go near the barn to damp for my canvases. You're barking up the wrong tree, Inspector." His casual dismissal of the murder as some tramp's bad luck grated. But Craddock pressed on, asking about visitors to the estate. Cedric's vague mention of ramblers near the tracks felt evasive, and Lucy, listening, marked him as less indifferent than he seemed. Harold, precise and aloof, offered a watertight alibi. "I was in London, Inspector, at my bank's annual dinner on December 20th. Dozens can confirm it. As for the barn, I've no reason to go. It's a liability, like this entire estate." His suggestion that Luther sell the property drew a sharp question from Craddock about the will. Harold's reply was curt. "Father's will is his affair. I manage my own finances." Lucy, passing the door, caught the tension in his voice, hinting at deeper frustrations. Alfred's interview was the most revealing. His usual charm faltered under Craddock's steady gaze. "I'm in and out. Inspector business in London, you know. Wasn't here much in December. The barn, never. Go there." His nervous laugh and shifting posture suggested deceit. And when Craddock asked about his business, Alfred's vagueness muttering about deals and contacts raised suspicion. Lucy, lingering nearby, saw him wipe his brow. As he left, his eyes avoiding hers, Dr. Quimper, questioned last, was smooth and cooperative. "I visit Luther 3 times a week, Inspector, and check on Emma's nerves. On December 20th, I was at my surgery until late, then here for dinner. The Barnes news to my stick to the house." His alibi was solid, backed by patient records, but his mention of prescribing sedatives for Emma piqued Lucy's interest. "She's been under strain," he added, his tone protective. Craddock nodded, but his eyes lingered on Quimper, sensing a man too polished to be entirely open. Miss Marple, still at Rutherford Hall under the guise of Lucy's aunt, joined the household for luncheon, her frail figure and incessant knitting disarming the family's suspicions. Seated beside Emma, she chatted about village life, her anecdotes, laced with subtle probes. "Such a large estate, my dear," she said, her needles clicking. "Do you ever walk by the railway? It's so close, one might stumble on anything." Emma's smile was strained. "Rarely, Miss Marple. The tracks are overgrown and father dislikes trespassers." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, but she pressed no further, her attention shifting to Alfred, who spilled his soup under her mild gaze. Lucy, serving the meal, caught Miss Marple's signula, slight tilt of the head toward the drawing room. After lunch, they met there, ostensibly to discuss Lucy's family matters. The room, with its faded velvet curtains and chipped ormolu clock, was empty, the family scattered. Miss Marple, settling into a chair, spoke softly. "You've done splendidly, Lucy. The body confirms Elspeth's story, and the fur links the quarry to the sarcophagus. The killer is here, among them, and those letters to Emma suggest a deeper game." Her fingers paused on her knitting, her eyes sharp. "Motive lies in money or love. Luther's will binds them, but what else?" Lucy, closing the door to ensure privacy, shared her observations. "Luther's obsessed with his fortune, Emma's burdened by duty, Cedric's defiant but careless, Harold's ambitious but distant, Alfred's hiding something, perhaps debts or worse. Quimper's too attentive to Emma, and I saw him exchange a look with Alfred yesterday, like a shared secret." She hesitated, then added, "Emma mentioned anonymous letters, and Craddock's after them. Could they be from the killer, or someone warning her?" Miss Marple's lips pursed, her mind sifting the threads. Letters are a coward's tool meant to frighten or mislead. If they warned Emma, they may point to a family member or someone close, like Quimper. His charm is deliberate, Lucy. A doctor has access, knowledge, and trust dangerous in the wrong hands. She leaned forward, her voice a whisper. "We must identify the woman. She's the key. If she knew a Krakenthorpe secret, her death was no random act. You must learn more about Emma's past, her wartime romance, perhaps, or any foreign connections." Lucy nodded, her resolve firm. "I'll talk to Emma, and keep watching Alfred and Quimper. The police are searching the grounds, but they're focused on the barn. Should I check the quarry again?" Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. "Not yet, Lucy. The killer may be watching. Let Craddock stir the pot. Your task is the household draw out their secrets, especially Emma's. She's the linchpin, whether she knows it or not." The afternoon brought a new development. Returning from the morgue, gathered the family in the library to share preliminary findings. The woman, he announced, was in her late 30s. Likely foreign, her coat bore a Parisian label, and her dental work suggested European origins. Strangulation was confirmed, with death occurring around December 20th, aligning with Mrs. Mc. Citing "We're tracing her identity," Craddock said, his gaze sweeping the room. "If anyone recalls a visitor, a stranger, or anything odd near the railway, speak now." The family's denials were swift. Luther's gruff, Cedric's flippant, Harold's formal, Alfred's nervous, Emma's quiet. Quimper, standing by Emma, added, "No strangers in Brackhampton, Inspector. I'd have heard at my surgery." His tone was confident, but Lucy, pouring tea, saw his hand brush Emma's, a gesture too intimate for a mere doctor. As the meeting dispersed, Lucy approached Emma, offering to help search for the anonymous letters. In Emma's bedroom, a cluttered space with faded floral wallpaper, they rifled through a desk. Emma, grateful for the company, grew talkative. "These letters frightened me, Lucy, but I didn't want to worry Father. They came in November 3 of them, typed, posted locally." She produced 2, their envelopes smudged but intact. The messages, in block capitals, read, "Beware, the estate's shadow and danger lies close." Lucy, memorizing the wording, asked gently, "Do you think they're tied to the body?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know. I've tried to keep this family together, but there's so much I don't understand." Sensing an opening, Lucy ventured further. "Miss Marple mentioned a wartime romance someone you cared for. Could these letters be connected?" Emma stiffened, then sighed. "That was years ago, Lucy. A French officer, Pierre. We met in 1944, but he died in the war. I've had no contact with his family." Her voice was firm, but her hands shook, and Lucy, respecting her reserve, changed the subject. The letters, she decided, would go to Craddock, but she'd share their contents with Miss Marple first. That evening, as the family retired, Lucy sat in her room, drafting a letter to Miss Marple. The woman's foreign, likely French, per Craddock. Emma's letters suggest a threat within the household. Alfred's nervous quimpers too smooth, and Emma's hiding pain perhaps tied to her past. "I'll dig deeper." She sealed the letter, her thoughts on the railway, its tracks a silent witness to the crime. The Crackenthorpes, bound by Luther's will, were unraveling, their secrets spilling like coins from a torn purse. Lucy, with Miss Marple's guidance, would gather them piece by piece until the murderer's face was clear. Chapter 7. The French Connection. The pale light of a late December morning filtered through the grimy windows of Rutherford Hall, casting a cold glow over the breakfast table where the Crackenthorpe family gathered in uneasy silence. The discovery of the strangled woman in the sarcophagus had tightened the atmosphere, each member wary of the police's probing and the shadow of suspicion that hung over the estate. Lucy Islesborough, moving with her characteristic efficiency, served coffee and toast, her sharp grey eyes noting every flicker of expression. The body, identified as a possible foreigner with a Parisian-labelled coat, had deepened the mystery, and Miss Marple's latest letter, slipped to Lucy by a discreet Brackhampton postman, urged her to pursue the victim's identity. "She is the key, Lucy. Her presence on that train was no accident. Seek her origins, and you will find the motive." Lucy's days were a delicate balance of household duties and covert investigation. Inspector Craddock's team continued their work, combing the grounds and questioning locals, but their focus remained on physical evidence: footprints, fibers, the barn's drag marks. Lucy, guided by Miss Marple's insight into human nature, sought the intangible, the secrets that bound the Krakenthorpes to a murder witnessed on the 4.50 from Paddington. The anonymous letters to Emma, warning of danger, hinted at a hidden truth. And Emma's mention of a wartime French lover, Pierre, suggested a link to the victim's foreign origins. Today, Lucy resolved to trace the woman's coat, hoping its trail would lead to a name. Breakfast was a strained affair, Luther Krakenthorpe's grumbling filling the silence. "Police tramping my land, costing me a fortune in privacy," he muttered, stabbing at his kippers. "That body's nothing to do with us. Just some foreign trouble washed up here." His eyes, sharp despite his age, darted to his children, as if daring them to contradict. Emma, pale and composed, murmured agreement, but her hands trembled as she buttered her toast. Cedric, nursing a hangover, laughed harshly. "Foreign or not, she's your problem now. Father should have sold this pile years ago." Harold, visiting for the weekend, adjusted his cufflinks, his silence louder than Cedric's taunts. Alfred, unusually subdued, toyed with his coffee, his fingers twitching. Dr. Quimper, present to monitor Luther's heart, offered a calming remark, but Lucy, clearing plates, caught his quick glance at Alfred, a moment of unspoken understanding that set her instincts alight. After breakfast, Lucy seized a chance to speak with Emma, helping her sort linens in the chilly laundry room. The task, mundane and intimate, loosened Emma's reserve. "It's all so dreadful, Lucy," she said, folding a sheet. "That poor woman, who was she to end up here?" Lucy, stacking pillowcases, ventured a gentle probe. "The police say her coat was French. You mentioned Pierre, your friend from the war. Could she be connected to him? Perhaps a relative?" Emma's hands stilled, her eyes distant. "Pierre's been dead 10 years, Lucy. His family was from Lyon, but I never met them. It's impossible." Her voice was firm, but a flicker of doubt crossed her face, and Lucy, sensing a thread, pressed lightly. "Might someone from his past have come looking for you? The letters you received, could they be tied to him?" Emma shook her head, but her unease was palpable, and Lucy withdrew, storing the reaction for Miss Marple. With Emma's words in mind, Lucy planned a trip to London, ostensibly to order supplies, but in truth to trace the coat. Miss Marple had suggested checking specialty shops catering to European immigrants, and Lucy, with her knack for detail, was eager to follow the lead. She caught the midday train, the familiar clatter of the rails a reminder of Mrs. McGillicuddy's vision. In London, she navigated the bustling streets to a small boutique in Soho, its window displaying coats and dresses with continental flair. The shop, Madame Dubos's, was known for French imports, and Lucy, posing as a curious buyer, engaged the proprietress, a wiry woman with a heavy accent, fur-trimmed coats. "Mademoiselle." We have many," Madame Dubois said, gesturing to a rack. Lucy described the victim's coat, dark wool, mid-length, with a distinctive fur collar. The proprietress's eyes lit up. "That sounds like one we sold in November. A young woman. French, bought it. She said she was visiting the countryside." Lucy's pulse quickened. "Do you recall her name or anything about her?" Madame Dubois frowned, then rummaged in a ledger. "Martine, she called herself. No surname, paid. In cash, a dancer, I think she had that grace. Mentioned Brackhampton, of all places." The detail electrified Lucy, but she kept her tone casual, purchasing a scarf to maintain her cover before leaving. Back at Rutherford Hall, Lucy mulled over Martine's identity. A French dancer, travelling to Brackhampton, strangled on a train. Her presence suggested a purpose, perhaps tied to Emma's past or the Krakenthorpe fortune. Lucy telephoned Miss Marple from Brackhampton's post office, her voice low. The victim's likely Martine, a French dancer, bought her coat in Soho. She mentioned Brackhampton. I think she knew someone. Here may be Emma's peers' family. Miss Marple's reply was crisp. Excellent, Lucy. Martine's no stranger, then. Press Emma about Pierre's kin, and watch Alfred. He's too nervous. The killer feared her knowledge. I'll join you soon, but keep Craddock informed. That evening, the household gathered for dinner, the tension thicker than the mutton. Stew Lucy served. Luther, emboldened by a glass of claret, railed against the police. They're digging up my quarry now, saying it's evidence. I'll have their jobs. Cedric, amused, goaded him. Let them dig, father. Maybe they'll find your gold. Harold's lips thinned, his patience fraying, while Alfred, pale, pushed his plate away. Quimper, attentive to Emma, suggested a sedative for Luther, his hand brushing hers. Lucy, clearing dishes, noted Alfred's fidgeting and Quimper's calm, her mind linking them to Martine's death. After dinner, Lucy found Emma in the drawing room, mending a curtain. The moment was opportune, the house quiet. Miss Emma, Lucy began, threading a needle. I've been thinking about those letters. If the woman was French, could she have known Pierre's family? Might they have sent her? Emma's needle paused, her eyes meeting Lucy's with a mix of fear and resignation. I've told you, Lucy, Pierre's gone. But his sister, Martine, wrote to me once, after the war. She blamed me for his death, said I'd broken his heart. I never replied. Her voice cracked, and Lucy, heart-pounding, kept her tone gentle. Martine, could she have come here, looking for you? Emma shook her head, but her hands trembled. I don't know, it was so long ago. The revelation that the victim shared the name of Pierre's sister was a breakthrough, but Lucy needed confirmation. She excused herself, slipping to her room to draft a letter to Miss Marple. Emma knew a Martine, Pierre's sister, who blamed her for his death. The victim may be her, seeking Emma or the estate. Alfred's agitation grows, and Quimper's too close to Emma. I'll trace Martine's movements in Brackhampton. She sealed the letter, her thoughts racing. Martine, a dancer, might have performed locally, leaving a trail. The next day, Lucy visited Brackhampton's theatre, a faded venue hosting music halls and amateur plays. Posing as a researcher, she questioned the manager, a jovial man named Mr. Higgs. A French dancer, you say? We had one in November. Martine Dubois, billed as La Parisienne. Lovely girl, but quiet. Stayed at the Red Lion, left after a week. He rummaged through a drawer, producing a playbill with Marty's name and a grainy photograph. The face, though blurred, matched the body's features: light hair, delicate build. Lucy's heart sank. Martine had been alive, vibrant, only weeks ago. Did she mention anyone? A friend, a destination? Lucy asked. Higgs scratched his chin. Said she was meeting someone near the estate, Rutherford Hall, I think. Didn't say who. The Red Lion, a modest inn near the station, yielded more. The landlady, Mrs. Potts, remembered Martine. Pretty thing, kept to herself. Had a visitor once, a man well-dressed, but I didn't catch his name. They argued in French, quietly, in the parlour. Mrs. Potts's description tall, greying. Polished fit, Dr. Quimper, and Lucy's suspicions deepened. Had Quimper known Martine, perhaps through Emma's past? Was he the man on the train, silencing a threat to his plans. Back at Rutherford Hall, Lucy shared her findings with Craddock, who was interviewing Tom, the gardener, about footprints near the quarry. Martine Dubois, a dancer, was in Brackhampton, she said, handing him the playbill. She stayed. The Red Lion mentioned meeting someone at the estate. The landlady saw her with a man possibly. Craddock's eyes narrowed, his notebook filling. Good work, Miss Islesborough. We'll check the inn, if she's our victim. Her connection to the Crackenthorpes is no coincidence. He hesitated, then added, Miss Marple's been in touch. She's convinced the killer's here, tied to the family's money or Emma's past. That evening, the household's mood was brittle. The police's presence a constant irritant. Luther, confined to his study, refused to eat, while Cedric painted furiously in his cottage, avoiding Craddock's men. Harold, preparing to return to London, spoke sharply to Emma about the estate's costs, his frustration palpable. Alfred, increasingly withdrawn, slipped out after dinner, his coat hastily donned. Lucy, clearing the table, saw Quimper linger, with Emma, his hand on her arm as he murmured about her health. You're overtaxed, Emma. Let me help. His voice was soothing, but Lucy, passing by, caught a glint of intensity in his eyes. Alone in her room, Lucy pieced together the puzzle. Martine, Pierre's sister, had come to Brackhampton, perhaps to confront Emma or claim a share of the Crackenthorpe. Wealth, her meeting with a man Quimper, suggested a deeper connection, one the killer feared exposed. Alfred's nervousness, Quimper's charm, and Emma's guarded past formed a triangle, with Martine at its centre. Lucy's letter to Miss Marple, posted the next morning, outlined her theory. Martine knew Emma's history with Pierre. She may have threatened Quimper's plans, perhaps a marriage to Emma for the estate. Alfred's involved, maybe as a witness or accomplice. I'll watch them closely. As she returned to the house, a police car arrived, Craddock stepping out with a grim expression. We've confirmed the bodies, Martine Dubois, he told Lucy privately. Dental records match, and the Red Lion's guest book lists her. She was here, and someone didn't want her talking. His words echoed Miss Marple's warning, and Lucy, her resolve steeling, knew the net was tightening. The Crackenthorpes, bound by their secrets, were unraveling, and Martine's death, once hidden in a sarcophagus, would soon expose a killer in their midst. Chapter 8. The doctor's charm. The frosty breath of January hung over Rutherford Hall, its crumbling Georgian facade a silent witness to the secrets unraveling within. The discovery of Martine Dubois's body in the sarcophagus, coupled with her identification as a French dancer linked to Emma Crackenthorpe's wartime past, had sharpened the focus of Inspector Dermot Craddock's investigation. Lucy Islesborough, the Oxford-educated housekeeper whose efficiency masked her role as Miss Marple's eyes and ears, moved through the household with a heightened sense of purpose. Martine's murder, witnessed by Mrs. Elspeth McGillicuddy on the 4.50 from Paddington, was no random act. It pointed to a motive rooted in the Crackenthorpe family's tangled web of greed, resentment, and hidden histories. Miss Marple's latest directive, delivered by a coded note, was clear. The killer is close, Lucy. Dr. Quimper's influence over Emma is troubling, and Alfred's unease suggests complicity. Follow the threads of Martine's purpose here, Lucy's. Days were a meticulous blend of domestic tasks and covert observation. The police, while diligent, lacked the intimate access she wielded, slipping into private moments and overhearing unguarded words. Craddock's team had confirmed Martine's identity through dental records and her stay at the Red Lion. where she'd met a man resembling Dr. John Quimper. This, combined with Emma's revelation that Martine was the sister of her wartime lover, peer, suggested a personal vendetta or a threat to the Krakenthorpe fortune. Lucy's suspicions increasingly centered on Quimper, whose polished charm and frequent visits seemed calculated, and Alfred, whose nervous demeanor hinted at a secret he could not contain. Breakfast at Rutherford Hall was a microcosm of the families. Discord, the clink of china punctuating strained silences. Luther Krakenthorpe, his wiry frame hunched over a boiled egg, grumbled about the police's intrusion. "They're tearing up my quarry, wasting my time. That Frenchwoman's nothing to US some drifter. Mark my words." His voice was sharp, but his eyes flicked nervously to his children, as if sensing betrayal. Emma, pouring tea, murmured, soothingly, though her face was drawn, the weight of the anonymous letters warning of danger still heavy. Cedric, sprawled in his chair, laughed bitterly. "Drifter or not, father, she's brought the law down on us. Should have raised that barn years ago." Harold, in town briefly, adjusted his tie, his silence a wall of disapproval. Alfred, pale and jittery, pushed his plate away, his fingers drumming the table. Quimper, present to check Luther's pulse, exuded calm, his smile disarming as he complimented Lucy's scones. Lucy, clearing the table, observed Quimper closely. His attentiveness to Emma adjusting her shawl, refilling her cup, was more than professional, yet his eyes held a watchfulness that chilled her. Alfred's glances at him, furtive and tense, suggested a shared burden, perhaps tied to Martine's death. As she retreated to the kitchen, Lucy resolved to investigate Quimper's movements, suspecting his medical bag, always at his side, might hold more than stethoscopes. Miss Marple's words echoed, "A doctor's access is a murderer's opportunity." Her chance came that afternoon, when Quimper arrived to treat Luther's rheumatism. The household was quiet. Emma in the garden, Cedric painting, Harold and Alfred in Brockhampton. Lucy, tasked with cleaning the library, positioned herself to overhear Quimper's consultation in the study. The door, slightly ajar, allowed snatches of conversation. "You're overtaxing yourself," Luther Quimper said, his tone soothing. "Let Emma handle the estate's worries." Luther's reply was a growl. "Emma's soft, and those boys are vultures. You're the only one I half trust, Quimper, but don't think I'm blind." The words, laced with suspicion, intrigued Lucy. Did Luther sense Quimper's ambitions? When Quimper left the study, Lucy followed discreetly, noting he lingered in the hall, his bag on a side table. As he stepped outside to speak with Emma, Lucy seized her moment. The bag unlatched, revealed syringes, vials, and a small notebook. She flipped it open, her heart racing, and saw a list of dates and initial Z, C, LC, A, C, with sums of money. One entry, dated December 19th, read, "MD Urgent," with a French address scrawled beside it. Martine Dubois. Lucy memorized the details, closing the bag as Quimper's footsteps returned. She busied herself with a duster, her face bland as he retrieved his bag and left. That evening, under the guise of fetching firewood, Lucy explored the garden where she'd seen Quimper the previous night, his silhouette outlined by a flare of light. The spot, near a disused well, was undisturbed, but a patch of ash caught her eye paper, recently burned, its edges curling. She retrieved a fragment, singed but legible, bearing the same French address from Quimper's notebook. Her pulse quickened. Quimper was destroying evidence, perhaps of his connection to Martine. She pocketed the fragment, planning to send it to Miss Marple with her next report. Dinner was a fraught affair, the family's nerves frayed by Craddock's latest questions about visitors to the estate. Luther, emboldened by claret, railed against his sons. "You're all scheming, waiting for my money. That woman's death is your doing, I'll wager." Cedric laughed, his defiance masking unease. "Keep your money, father. I'd rather paint than grovel." Harold's lips thinned, his voice icy. "This estate's a millstone. Sell it, and we're free." Alfred, sweating, muttered about London business, his eyes avoiding Quimper, who sat beside Emma, his hand brushing hers as he passed the salt. Lucy, serving the pudding, caught Emma's shy smile, but also her fleeting frown when Quimper mentioned the police. "They'll move on soon, Emma," he said. "No need to worry." His tone was reassuring, but Lucy sensed a warning. After dinner, Lucy found Emma alone in the drawing room, mending a lace tablecloth. The moment was ripe for confidences, and Lucy, offering to help, steered the conversation to Quimper. "Dr. Quimper's so kind to you, Miss Emma," she said, threading a needle. "He seems devoted." Emma's cheeks flushed, but her eyes were troubled. "John's been a friend, Lucy, especially with father's health, but he's insistent sometimes. He talks of marriage, but father would never allow it." Her voice dropped, and Lucy, sensing vulnerability, probed gently. "Marriage, that's serious. Has he known the family long?" Emma nodded, her needle pausing. "Since he came to Brackhampton 5 years ago. He's helped us through so much, but I wonder, does he want me or the estate?" Her candour startled Lucy, who filed it away, suspecting Quimper's motives aligned with Miss Marple's theory of greed. The next day, Lucy took the bus to Brackhampton, ostensibly for supplies, but in truth to investigate Quimper's background. At the library, she scanned local records, finding his medical practice registered in 1952 with glowing testimonials but no prior history. A chat with the librarian, a talkative woman, yielded more. "Dr. Quimper, oh, he's a charmer, but came out of nowhere. Some say he trained abroad France, maybe. Keeps to himself, except at Rutherford Hall." The hint of a French connection electrified Lucy, tying Quimper to Martine's origins. She telephoned Miss Marple from a public booth, her voice low. "Quimper's notebook mentions Martine and a French address. He burned papers with the same address. Emma says he's proposed, but she's unsure. He may have known Martine abroad." Miss Marple's reply was swift. "Dangerous, Lucy. He's weaving a net around Emma. Check his surgery, but be cautious. I'll arrive tomorrow with Craddock." Lucy's next stop was Quimper's surgery, a neat building near Brackhampton's High Street. Posing as a patient, seeking a referral, she engaged the receptionist, a young woman named Betty. "Dr. Quimper's with a patient, miss, but I can book you tomorrow," Betty said, her desk cluttered with files. Lucy, feigning indecision, asked about Quimper's experience. "He's ever so skilled, miss, trained in Paris, they say, before the war. Loves his work at Rutherford Hall." The Paris link, though unconfirmed, strengthened Lucy's suspicions. She left without booking, her mind racing. Had Quimper met Martine in France, perhaps through Pierre's family? Was her arrival a threat to his plans to marry Emma and secure the Crackenthorpe fortune? Back at Rutherford Hall, the atmosphere grew heavier. Craddock, returning from the Red Lion, shared news with Lucy privately. Martine's visitor at the inn was definitely a man tall, greying, polished. The landlady's sure it was Quimper, though she won't swear to it. They argued in French, about money. Lucy nodded, revealing the burned paper and notebook. Entries. Craddock's eyes narrowed. He's hiding something, but we need proof. Keep watching him, Miss Islesborough. Miss Marple's convinced he's central. Lucy agreed, her resolve firm, though the risk of confronting a killer weighed on her. That evening, as the family gathered in the drawing room, Lucy served sherry, her ears attuned to their talk. Luther, emboldened by drink, accused his sons of plotting. You're all after my will, but you'll get nothing while I breathe. Cedric laughed, Harold glared, and Alfred, pale, slipped out, muttering about a headache. Quimper, beside Emma, suggested a walk to ease her nerves, but she declined, her eyes meeting Lucy's with a plea for rescue. Lucy intervened, asking Emma to check the pantry, and Quimper, thwarted, left soon after, his bag clutched tightly. Alone with Emma, Lucy pressed her advantage. Miss Emma, those letters could Dr. Quimper have sent them, to frighten you into needing him. Emma's eyes widened, but she shook her head. John, no, he's been kind, but I don't know. He's so sure of himself, and father distrusts him. Her doubt was a crack in Quimper's armor, and Lucy, storing it, planned her next move. She wrote to Miss Marple, enclosing the burned fragment. Quimper's link to Martine via France. His notebook and burned papers prove it. He's pressing Emma for marriage, but she's wavering. Alfred's crumbling May no more, awaiting your arrival. The next morning, as Lucy swept the hall, she overheard Alfred on the telephone. His voice low but frantic. It's too much, I tell you. If they find out, we're done. He hung up, not seeing Lucy, and slipped out, his coat askew. She followed at a distance, watching him head toward the quarry, where he met a shadowy figure too far to identify, but their gestures were heated. Was it Quimper or another accomplice? Lucy retreated, her heart pounding, knowing she was close to the truth. As she prepared tea for Miss Marple's imminent arrival, Lucy felt the net tightening. Quimper's charm, Alfred's fear, and Emma's doubt formed a pattern, with Martienne's death at its heart. The doctor's ambition to wed Emma and claim the estates seemed the motive, but his connection to Martine remained the key. Lucy, with Miss Marple's guidance and Craddock's backing, would unravel it, exposing a killer who thought his crime buried in a sarcophagus. The railway's distant whistle, echoing through the dusk, was a reminder of the murder's origin. And Lucy, her mathematician's logic aligned with her sleuth's instinct, was ready to bring it to light. Chapter 9. The quarry trap. The winter chill deepened around Rutherford Hall. The estate's sprawling grounds cloaked in a mist that clung to the bare trees and muffled the distant hum of the railway. The discovery of Martine Dubois's body in the sarcophagus had thrust the Crackenthorpe family into a crucible of suspicion, each member grappling with Inspector Dermot Craddock's relentless inquiries. Lucy Islesborough, the brilliant housekeeper whose domestic role concealed her mission. For Miss Jane Marple, moved through the household with a quiet intensity. Martin's murder, witnessed by Mrs. Elspeth McGillicuddy on the 4.50 from Paddington, was now tied to the estate, her French origins and connection to Emma Crackenthorpe's wartime lover, Pierre, pointing to a motive rooted in greed or betrayal. Miss Marple's latest note, slipped to Lucy via a trusted Brackhampton courier, was unequivocal. Quimper's ambition is clear, Lucy, but Alfred's fear betrays knowledge. The quarry holds more secrets. Tread carefully, the killer is watching. Lucy's days were a delicate dance of chores and investigation, her sharp mind cataloguing the family's tensions, while her hands polished silver or mended curtains. Dr. John Quimper's calculated charm, Alfred Crackenthorpe's mounting anxiety, and Emma's guarded admissions about her past formed a web, with Martine's death at its center. The burned paper fragment, bearing a French address linked to Quimper's notebook, and Alfred's furtive quarry meeting had heightened Lucy's suspicions. The police, though thorough, lacked her intimate access, and Craddock, briefed by Miss Marple through her nephew Raymond West, relied on Lucy's insights to navigate the Crackenthorpe maze. Today, she resolved to revisit the quarry, where the scrap of fur and disturbed earth suggested Martine's body had first landed before its move to the sarcophagus. Breakfast was a grim affair, the dining room's faded grandeur a backdrop to the family's unease. Luther Crackenthorpe, his voice rasping with indignation, railed against the police's quarry search. "They're digging up my land, looking for ghosts. That Frenchwoman's no kin of ours, some vagrant's trouble, dumped here to ruin me." His eyes, sharp with paranoia, swept over his children, lingering on Alfred, who shrank under the scrutiny. Emma, serving toast, murmured placations, but her hands shook. The strain of the anonymous letters and Martine's death eroding her calm. Cedric, his paint-stained fingers drumming the table, scoffed. "Let them dig, father. Maybe they'll find your sense." Harold, in Brackhampton for a meeting, was absent, his aloofness a silent rebuke. Alfred, pale and sweating, barely touched. His tea, his eyes darting to the window as if expecting pursuit. Dr. Quimper, present to adjust Luther's medication, exuded reassurance, his smile a polished mask. "The police will tire soon, Luther. Focus on your health." Lucy, clearing plates, noted Quimper's hand lingering on Emma's wrist, a gesture too familiar for a mere physician. As she retreated to the kitchen, Lucy planned her quarry visit. The police had searched it superficially, finding nothing beyond the fur scrap she'd sent to Miss Marple, but her instincts, honed by past investigations, urged a closer look. The quarry, overgrown and secluded, was a short walk from the railway, its rocky edges perfect for concealing evidence. She chose late morning, when the household was occupied amas in the village, Luther napping, Cedric painting, Alfred in London, and Quimper at his surgery. Armed with the pretext of gathering kindling, she slipped out, a small trowel and notebook hidden in her basket. The quarry lay beyond the woods, its jagged outlines shrouded in mist. The railway tracks glinted nearby, their proximity a stark reminder of Martine's fatal journey. Lucy moved cautiously, her boots crunching on frozen leaves as she scanned the ground. The disturbed earth she'd noted earlier, near a cluster of brambles, was still evident, though trampled by police boots. Kneeling, she probed with her trowel, uncovering a small metal button, its surface tarnished but engraved with a French insignia. It matched the style of Martine's coat, suggesting her body had indeed landed here before being dragged to the barn. Lucy pocketed it, her heart racing, but her search was cut short by a low rumble above. A boulder, loosened from the quarry's rim, rolled toward her, its momentum deadly. Lucy dove aside, scraping her hands as she hit the ground, the rock crashing into a tree mere feet away. Her breath came in gasps, her mind racing. The boulder's fall was no accident, someone had pushed it, watching her from above. She scanned the rim, but the mist obscured any figure, and silence returned, broken only by the railway's hum. Shaken but resolute, she retreated, her basket abandoned, and hurried back to the house, her scraped palms stinging. The attack confirmed her fears. The killer knew she was close, and the quarry held more than buttons. Back at Rutherford Hall, Lucy bandaged her hands, blaming the scrapes on a fall to avoid questions. She telephoned Miss Marple from the Brackhampton post office, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Someone tried to kill me at the quarry, Miss Marple. A boulder, deliberately pushed. I found a button from Martine's coat proof. She was there first. Quimper or Alfred, I think, saw me." Miss Marple's reply was grave. "You're in danger, Lucy, but you've struck a nerve. The killer's desperate. Stay with Craddock, and bait them subtly. I'm coming tonight, with Raymond." "Send the button," Lucy agreed, posting the button and a coded note. "Quarry attack, confirms killers here. Button links to Martine. Alfred's cracking Quimpers to calm. Awaiting you." That afternoon, Craddock arrived, his lean face set as he questioned Lucy privately in the library. "A boulder, you're lucky, Miss Islesborough. The quarry's unstable, but that sounds deliberate." She shared the button, omitting her call. "To Miss Marple, to protect their plan." Craddock nodded, adding it to his evidence. "We're watching Quimper, his alibi's solid, but that Red Lion meeting with Martine's suspect, Alfred's, shakier. His London trips don't check out. Keep your eyes open, but no more solo trips." Lucy nodded, sensing his trust, though she knew Miss Marple's strategy would outpace the police. Dinner was a crucible, the family's nerves fraying under the police's shadow. Luther, emboldened by Sherry, accused his sons of sabotage. "You're all in league, bringing this mess to my door. That woman's your fault, I'll wager." Cedric laughed, his defiance brittle. "Blame us, father, but you're the one hoarding secrets." Harold, back from Brackhampton, snapped, "This estate's cursed. Sell it, and we're done." Alfred, trembling, spilled his wine, his eyes avoiding Quimper, who sat beside Emma, his voice soothing as he suggested rest. "You're exhausted, Emma. Let me prescribe something." Lucy, serving the roast, saw Emma hesitate, her trust in Quimper wavering. Seizing the moment, Lucy orchestrated a subtle trap, as Miss Marple had advised. During dessert, she spoke loudly to Emma, ensuring the family heard. "Miss Emma, I found an old French letter in the barn while cleaning something about a visitor to the estate. Should I give it to the police?" The lie was calculated, and the reactions immediate. Quimper's spoon paused, his eyes narrowing. Alfred choked, coughing violently, while Luther glared, sensing deceit. Cedric raised an eyebrow, amused, and Harold's lips tightened. Emma, confused, stammered, "A letter." "I show it to Inspector Craddock, Lucy." Lucy nodded, retreating, her heart pounding. Quimper's flicker of alarm and Alfred's panic were the bait's reward. That night, the trap bore fruit. Lucy, feigning sleep, heard footsteps outside her attic room. Slipping to the window, she saw a figure Alfred, by his slight build hurrying toward the garden, a torch in hand. She followed silently, keeping to the shadows, and watched him dig near the disused well where Quimper had burned papers. Alfred unearthed a small tin, his movements frantic, but before he could open it, a second figure emerged. Quimper, his voice low and sharp. "You fool, Alfred, you'll ruin everything." Their argument, too quiet to hear fully, ended with Alfred shoving the tin back into the earth and fleeing. Quimper lingered, scanning the darkness, and Lucy, hidden by a hedge, held her breath until he left. She retrieved the tin at dawn. Its contents a revelation, a typed note matching the anonymous letters to Emma, warning of a shadow on the estate, and a photograph of Martine, her face serene, inscribed to JQ with regret. The initials confirmed Quimper's link, and the note suggested he'd tried to manipulate Emma's fears. Lucy hid the tin in her room, planning to show Craddock after Miss Marple's arrival. The quarry attack, Alfred's panic, and Quimper's confrontation painted a clear picture. They were complicit. With Quimper, the mastermind, Miss Marple arrived that evening, her frail figure and fluffy shawl disarming the household. Posing as Lucy's aunt, she joined the family for tea, her chatter about St. Mary Mead laced with probes. Such a tragedy, that poor French girl, she said, her needles clicking. Did she ever visit? Miss Emma, perhaps looking for you? Emma's eyes widened, but she shook her head. No, Miss Marple, I never met her. Quimper, pouring tea, interjected smoothly. No visitors here, ma'am. Brackhampton's too quiet for intrigue. His smile was perfect, but Miss Marple's mild gaze held him, and Lucy saw his jaw tightened after tea. Lucy and Miss Marple conferred in the drawing-room, the tin's contents spread before them. Quimper knew Martine, Miss Marple said, her voice low. This photo proves it. He sent those letters to frighten Emma, to bind her to him. Alfred's his tool, perhaps blackmailed, perhaps paid. The quarry attack was their warning to you. Lucy nodded, producing the button. Martine's body landed there, then was moved. Quimper's after Emma's inheritance, but why kill Martine? Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. Martine knew his past, perhaps a fraud, a secret that would ruin his plans. We need proof of his history. Craddock must search his surgery. As they planned, a scream shattered the silence. Annie, the maid, in the hall. It's Mr. Alfred. He's dead. The household rushed to the garage, where Alfred lay slumped in his car, a vial of poison beside him. Craddock summoned, confirmed cyanide, his face grim. Suicide or murder, he muttered, eyeing the family. Lucy, meeting Miss Marple's gaze, knew the truth. Alfred, cracking under guilt or fear, had been silenced. The tin, the photo, and the quarry attack pointed to Quimper, but the net was not yet tight. Miss Marple's whisper, as they returned to the house, was resolute. He's desperate, Lucy. We must act swiftly, or Emma's next. Chapter 10. Miss Marple's theory. The air in St. Mary Mead was crisp, the village stirring under a January sky as Miss Jane Marple sat by her parlour fire in Dame Mead Cottage. The chintz curtains framed a frosty garden, and the mantelpiece, cluttered with photographs and a single porcelain shepherdess, glowed in the firelight. Miss Marple, her white hair neatly pinned and her shawl draped over her shoulders, sipped tea, her knitting idle on her lap. Across from her, Inspector Dermot Craddock and Lucy Islesborough occupied the settee, their faces reflecting the gravity of the case that had drawn them from Rutherford Hall. The murder of Martine Dubois, witnessed by Mrs. Elspeth McGillicuddy on the 4.50 from Paddington, had escalated with Alfred Crackenthorpe's death poisoned, likely murdered, in his car. The tin Lucy had unearthed, containing a photograph of Martine inscribed to Dr. John Quimper, and a typed note matching Emma's anonymous letters, pointed to a killer within the Crackenthorpe circle. Miss Marple had summoned Lucy and Craddock to lay out her theory, her frail frame belying the steel of her mind. The journey from Rutherford Hall had been swift, Lucy driving Craddock in her hired car while Miss Marple took the train, her presence in St. Mary Mead framed as a family visit, to avoid suspicion. The parlour, with its familiar comforts, was a stark contrast to the tension of the estate, where the Crackenthorpes reeled from Alfred's death and the police's tightening scrutiny. Lucy, her grey eyes sharp, recounted the latest developments. The quarry attack, the tin's contents, and Quimper's confrontation with Alfred by the well. Alfred was terrified, she said, setting her cup down. He knew too much, and Quimper silenced him. The photograph proves Quimper knew Martine, and the note suggests he sent those letters to manipulate Emma. Craddock, his lean face etched with fatigue, nodded, his notebook open. We've searched Quimper's surgery, Miss Islesborough, on your tip. Found nothing incriminating, no poisons, no French papers. His records show he trained in Paris pre-war, but they're sparse. The Red Lion's landlady swears he met Martine, arguing about money, but it's circumstantial. Alfred's cyanide points to murder his debts, and shady deals made him a blackmailer, likely targeting Quimper, but we need hard evidence. He glanced at Miss Marple, his respect for her evident. Miss Marple, you've unravelled tougher knots. What's your take? Miss Marple set her cup on the table, her eyes bright with the clarity of a puzzle nearing resolution. Human nature, Inspector, is predictable, and this case is no exception. Martine Dubois's murder, seen by my friend Elspeth, was no random act. It was planned, executed with audacity on a train, and concealed with cunning on the Krakenthorpe estate. Alfred's death confirms the killer's ruthlessness. Let us piece it together, step by step, and see where the threads lead. Her voice was soft, but its precision commanded attention, and Lucy leaned forward, her mathematician's logic attuned to Miss Marple's reasoning. She began with Martine. Martine Dubois, a French dancer, was Pierre's sister, Emma's wartime lover. Emma told Lucy that Martine blamed her for Pierre's death, writing once in anger but never contacting her again. Yet Martine came to Brackhampton, staying at the Red Lion, performing at the theatre, and meeting a man Quimper by description. Why? I believe Martine knew a secret about Quimper, one that threatened his plans. The photograph in the tin, inscribed JQ with regret, suggests a past connection, perhaps in France. Quimper, trained in Paris, may have known Pierre's family, or Martine herself, in a way that could ruin him. Craddock interjected, his pen poised. A secret? Like what? His credentials check out, though they're thin before 1952. Miss Marple's lips pursed, her knitting needles twitching as if impatient. Credentials can be forged, Inspector. Quimper's polish, his sudden appearance in Brackhampton, his focus on Emmethy's suggest a man with a constructed past. Suppose he is not what he seems, a fraud, perhaps posing as a doctor to gain trust. Martine, recognizing him from France, posed a threat. She may have come to expose him or to demand payment for her silence. Lucy nodded, her mind racing. That fits. The notebook entry, MD, urgent with a French address and Quimper was dealing with Martine, maybe paying her off. The burned papers show he's hiding something. And his proposal to Emiche said he's insistent, but Luther distrusts him. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. Exactly, Lucy. Quimper courts Emma not for love, but for the Krakenthorpe fortune. Luther's will, tying the estate to his children, makes Emma the key. If Quimper marries her, he gains control, especially if Luther dies. Martine's arrival jeopardized fear she knew his true identity, or a scandal that would derail his scheme. She turned to the murder itself, her voice steady. Consider the train. Quimper, knowing Martine was travelling perhaps to meet Emma or confront him, boarded the 5.15 from Euston. He found her in a compartment, alone, and strangled her. trusting the train's speed and the drawn blinds to hide his act. Elspeth's glimpse, a chance alignment of carriages, was his only miscalculation. He threw the body from the train near Rutherford Hall, where the tracks skirt the quarry, a place he knew from his visits. The fur scrap and button Lucy found confirmed this. Later, he moved the body to the sarcophagus, a forgotten relic, to delay discovery. Craddock frowned, his logic wrestling with her narrative, bold but risky. Why not leave the body by the tracks? Miss Marple's smile was faint. Risky, yes, but Quimper is bold. Leaving the body exposed invited immediate investigation. The sarcophagus, known only to the family, bought time. He underestimated Lucy's thoroughness and Elspeth's witness. Alfred's role, I suspect, came later. He saw something perhaps Quimper moving the body or was drawn in by greed. The tin's note, matching Emma's letters, shows Quimper's manipulation. But Alfred may have helped send them, hoping to profit. Lucy's eyes widened, recalling Alfred's quarry meeting. He was digging by the well, arguing with Quimper. The tin had the note, and photo Alfred was hiding evidence, or blackmailing him. Miss Marple nodded, her knitting resumed, the needles a soft counterpoint to her words. Blackmail is a dangerous game. Alfred, with his debts and schemes, saw Quimper's secret as a windfall. Quimper cornered, poisoned him with cyanide, staging it as suicide. The vial in the car was too convenient. Murderers love such touches. Leaned back, his notebook filled. Quimper's, our man. Then, motive, Emma's inheritance. Opportunity, access to the estate and train. Means medical knowledge, possibly cyanide from his surgery. But we need proof his past, or a witness placing him on the 5.15. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Proof lies in his fear, Inspector. Lucy's quarry attack was no accident. Quimper, or Alfred under his orders, saw her searching, her bait. At dinner, the invented French letter flushed him out. His reaction, and Alfred's panic, betray guilt. We must trap him, using his own ambition. She outlined her plan, her voice low and precise. Lucy, return to Rutherford Hall and invite Quimper to the barn, claiming you've found a diary Martine's, detailing his secret. Forge a letter, vague but threatening, to lure him. Inspector, have your men hide nearby, ready to arrest. Emma must be present to see his true nature. Quimper's greed will draw him. He cannot resist silencing another threat. Lucy nodded, her resolve firm, though the risk weighed heavy. Craddock, skeptical but trusting, agreed. It's unorthodox, Miss Marple, but your hunches have panned out before. We'll set it for tomorrow night. Miss Islesborough, you're sure you're up to it? Lucy's smile was steady. I've faced worse, Inspector. Quimper's clever, but he's cornered. I'll play my part. Miss Marple's hand rested on hers, a gesture of quiet strength. You're my knight, Lucy, but a cautious one. Dangerous, but his arrogance is his weakness. We'll have him. The fire crackled, its warmth a contrast to the chill of their purpose, and Craddock rose, his notebook tucked away. I'll arrange the men and brief Emmeshy's key, but fragile, Miss Marple, you're staying here. Miss Marple's nod was serene. For now, Inspector, I'll join you at Rutherford Hall tomorrow as Lucy's aunt. My presence will steady Emma. As Craddock left to coordinate with his team, Lucy lingered, sharing tea with Miss Marple. The parlour's coziness belied the stakes, and Lucy voiced a lingering doubt. What if Quimper's not alone? Alfred's death suggests he's ruthless, but could another Crackenthorpe be involved? Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, sifting the possibility. Unlikely, Lucy. Cedric's too careless, Harold too distant. Luther's paranoia blinds him, and Emma's guilt is her innocence. Quimper used Alfred, and Alfred paid the price. But watch. Cedric is sharper than he seems, and may know more than he lets on. Lucy nodded, her mind mapping the plan. The forged letter would be simple. I know who you are, John. Pierre's death was no accident. Meet me at the barn, or the police get this. Vague enough to alarm, specific enough to draw him. She'd write it tonight, using a typewriter from Brackhampton's library to mimic the anonymous letters. Emma's presence would force Quimper to reveal himself, and Craddock's men would ensure safety. The quarry, the sarcophagus, the tin ore. Threads converging on a killer who thought his crime buried. As Lucy drove back to Rutherford Hall, the countryside dark and silent, she felt the weight of Miss Marple's trust. The estate loomed ahead, its windows glinting like eyes, and she steeled herself for the final act. Quimper's charm, Alfred's death, and Martine's silenced voice formed a pattern, and Lucy, with her logic and courage, would unravel it. Back in St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple picked up her knitting, the needles clicking as she envisioned the trap. The railway's whistle, faint in her memory, was a call to justice. And she knew Lucy would answer it. At Rutherford Hall, Lucy slipped into her room, the house quiet save for Luther's snores and Emma's soft footsteps. She typed the letter, her fingers steady, and sealed it in an envelope marked for Quimper. Tomorrow, she'd deliver it, claiming it was found in the barn, and set the stage. The Crackenthorpes, fraying under suspicion, were a tinderbox, and Quimper, their trusted doctor, was the spark. As she lay in bed, the distant trains hum a reminder of Martine's fate. Lucy felt a surge of determination. The truth, buried in a sarcophagus and a poisoned car, was rising, and Quimper's mask would fall. Chapter 11. The confrontation, the mist that shrouded Rutherford Hall on the evening of January 10th was thick, curling around the estate's gnarled trees and muffling the distant hum of the railway. The house, its Georgian facade sagging under years of neglect, seemed to hold its breath, as if aware of the trap being set within its grounds. Lucy Islesborough, her grey eyes steady despite the pulse of adrenaline, moved with her usual efficiency, her housekeeper's apron a disguise for the sleuth she had become. The murder of Martine Dubois, witnessed by Mrs. Elspeth McGillicuddy on the 4.50 from Paddington, had led to this moment, carefully orchestrated confrontation to unmask Dr. John Quimper as the killer. Alfred Crackenthorpe's poisoned body, found in his car, had confirmed the stakes, and Miss Jane Marple's theory, laid out in St. Mary Mead, guided Lucy's every step. The plan, devised in Miss Marple's cosy parlour, was precise yet perilous. Lucy had typed a forged letter, mimicking the anonymous notes sent to Emma Crackenthorpe, claiming to have found Martine's diary in the Barner document exposing Quimper's true identity and his role in her death. The letter, slipped to Quimper that morning via a pretext of misdelivered mail, read, "I know your secret. John Martine wrote it, all your past, Pierre's death, the estate. Meet me at the barn tonight, 8 p.m, or the police get the diary." Vague enough to alarm, specific enough to draw him, it was the bait to lure Quimper into revealing himself. Inspector Dermot Craddock, briefed by Miss Marple and Lucy, had positioned his men in the woods, ready to pounce. Emma, unaware of the full plan but persuaded to attend, would witness Quimper's unmasking, her presence a catalyst to break his composure. Lucy spent the day maintaining her routine, polishing silver and directing the staff, her calm exterior masking her alertness. The Krakenthorpe household, frayed by Alfred's death and the police's relentless presence, was a tinderbox. Luther Krakenthorpe, confined to his study, muttered about conspiracies, his paranoia fed by the loss of his youngest son. Emma, pale and withdrawn, managed the house with mechanical efficiency, her trust in Quimper shaken by Lucy's subtle hints. Cedric, painting in his cottage, avoided the main house, his defiance tinged with unease. Harold, back in London, had left a void of cold judgment, while the staff Mrs. Kidder, Tom, and Annie whispered of curses on the estate. Quimper, summoned to check Luther's health, arrived at noon, his polished charm intact but his eyes wary. Lucy, serving him tea, noted his grip on his medical bag, as if it anchored him against the letter's threat. Miss Marple, posing as Lucy's aunt, had returned to Rutherford Hall that afternoon, her frail figure and incessant knitting disarming the family's suspicions. She sat in the drawing-room, chatting with Emma about village fates, her mild questions probing the edges of Emma's fears. "Such a dreadful time, my dear," she said, her needles clicking. "Do you think that poor girl, Martine, knew someone here? Her French connection is so curious." Emma's reply was hesitant. I can't imagine, Miss Marple, but those letters, they warned of danger. I wish I'd understood." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, but she pressed no further, her presence a quiet anchor for the evening's plan. As dusk fell, Lucy prepared the barn, the site of Martine's grim discovery. The sagging structure, its timbers silvered by moonlight, stood at the estate's edge, near the woods where Craddock's men hid. She placed a small table inside, setting a locked diary borrowed from her own belongings. There's the supposed evidence. The forged letter, a copy kept for Craddock, was tucked in her apron, ready to show Emma. She checked the barn's exits, ensuring a clear path if Quimper turned violent, and lit a single lantern, its glow casting eerie shadows over the sarcophagus, now empty but looming as a reminder of the crime. Her scraped palms, from the quarry attack, ached faintly, a warning of the killer's ruthlessness, but her resolve was ironclad. At 7:30 p.m., Lucy met Emma in the hall, her tone urgent but calm. "Miss Emma, I've found something in the barn. Diary, possibly Martine's. It mentions Dr. Quimper and a secret about the estate. I've asked him to explain it, but I need you there. Will you come?" Emma's eyes widened, her trust in Lucy outweighing her doubt. "A diary, John? Oh, Lucy, this is dreadful. Yes, I'll come." Her voice trembled, but she followed, wrapping a shawl against the cold. Miss Marple, lingering nearby, gave Lucy a nod, her presence ensuring Emma's safety until Craddock's men closed in. The barn's door creaked as Lucy and Emma entered, the lantern's light flickering on their faces. Emma, clutching her shawl, glanced at the sarcophagus, her breath catching here, where she was found. Lucy nodded, guiding her to the table. "The diary's locked, but I read enough to know it's serious. Quimper's coming to explain. Stay by me, Miss Emma." She positioned Emma near the door, within sight of Craddock's hidden team, and waited, her heart steady despite the tension. Quimper arrived at 8 p.m., his footsteps crunching on the frosty path. His silhouette filled the doorway, his medical bag in hand, his face a mask of controlled calm. "Miss Islesborough," he said, his voice smooth but edged, "your note was alarming. A diary." Let's see it. His eyes flicked to Emma, a flash of unease crossing his features. Emma, what are you doing here? This is no place for you. Emma's reply was soft but firm. Lucy says it concerns you, John. I need to know the truth. Lucy stepped forward, holding the diary, her tone measured. I found this in the barn, Dr. Quimper, hidden near the sarcophagus. It's Martine. She names you, says you knew her in France, that you're not what you seem. She wrote about Pierre's death and a plan to take the estate. The lies, crafted to provoke, hit their mark. Quimper's smile faltered, his hand tightening on his bag. That's absurd. Martine was a stranger, a dancer, nothing more. Show me the diary. His voice was steady, but his eyes darted too. The shadows, sensing a trap. Lucy opened the diary to a blank page, revealing the forged letter tucked inside. This was with it, in her handwriting. I know who you are, John. Pierre's death was no accident. What did she mean, Doctor? She held it out, watching his reaction. Quimper's composure cracked, his hand lunging for the letter, but Lucy stepped back. Closer to Emma. You met Martine at the Red Lion, argued about money. You were on the 5.15 from Euston, weren't you? You strangled her, threw her body into the quarry, then hid it here. Her accusations, sharp and deliberate, echoed in the barn, and Emma gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Quimper's face twisted, his charm evaporating. You meddling fool, he snarled, dropping his bag. Martine was a blackmailer, threatening to ruin me. Yes, I knew her in France. She was Pierre's sister, obsessed with revenge. She thought I'd cheated her family, wanted money to stay quiet. His voice rose, his eyes wild. I didn't mean to kill her. It was a moment's panic on that train. She wouldn't stop talking, threatening Emma, the estate. I had to protect what's mine. His admission, raw and unguarded, stunned Emma, who shrank back, tears welling. Lucy pressed, her voice calm but relentless. And Alfred, did he threaten you too? You poisoned him, staged it as suicide. Quimper laughed, a harsh sound. Alfred was weak, saw me move the body, thought he could bleed me dry. I gave him what he deserved, like Martine. And you, Miss Islesborough, you're next if you don't hand over that diary. He stepped forward, a syringe glinting in his hand, its needle catching the lantern's light. Emma screamed, and Lucy, ready, dodged as Quimper lunged, her foot catching his shin. The barn door burst open, Craddock and his men rushing in, their torches blinding. Drop it, Quimper. Craddock barked, his revolver trained. Quimper froze, the syringe falling as two constables seized him, cuffing his wrists. Emma, sobbing, clung to Lucy, who steadied her, her own breath ragged but triumphant. Craddock, holstering his weapon, nodded to Lucy. Well played, Miss Islesborough. He's confessed enough for a conviction. He turned to Quimper, whose face was now ashen, his charm shattered. You're under arrest for the murders of Martine Dubois and Alfred Crackenthorpe. Anything you say will be used against you. As the constables led Quimper away, Miss Marple appeared at the barn door, her shawl tight against the cold. Her eyes, bright with satisfaction, met Lucy's. You were splendid, my dear. Emma's safe, and justice is served. Emma, trembling, approached Miss Marple, her voice broken. How could I not see John? He was so kind. Miss Marple's hand rested on hers, gentle but firm. Kindness, my dear, can mask ambition. You're free of him now. Craddock, overseeing the scene, questioned Quimper further as he was bundled into a police car. Why, Martine? What was her holdover? You. Quimper, defeated, muttered. She knew me from Paris. I wasn't a doctor, just a clerk who forged papers during the war. Pierre helped me, but Martine found out, thought I'd betrayed him to the Germans. She came to ruin me, to tell Emma. I couldn't let her. His words, a final unraveling, confirmed Miss Marple's theory. A fraudster posing as a doctor, his sights on Emma's inheritance, undone by a vengeful sister, back in the house. The Krakenthorpes gathered in the drawing room, stunned by the night's events. Luther, roused from his study, raged at the betrayal, though relief softened his tone. That quack fooled us all, but he'll hang for it. Cedric, unusually somber, poured brandy, his defiance muted. Harold, summoned from London, arrived. As the police departed, his face grim but unsuppressed. Quimper was too smooth. I should have seen it. Lucy, serving tea to steady the family, felt the weight of their gratitude, though her thoughts were with Miss Marple, who sat knitting, her presence a quiet anchor. Craddock joined them, his report concise. Quimpers confessed fully. He met Martine in France, used her brother's connections to build a false identity. When she tracked him to Brackhampton, threatening to expose him, he killed her on the train, hid her body in the quarry, then the sarcophagus. Alfred, witnessing the move, blackmailed him. So Quimper poisoned him with cyanide from his surgery. The letters to Emma were to bind her to him, make her dependent. We found the typewriter in his office, and his bag had traces of cyanide. He nodded to Lucy and Miss Marple. Without you two, he'd have slipped through. Emma, her eyes red but resolute, thanked Lucy. You saved me, Lucy, and Miss Marple, you saw what I couldn't. Miss Marple's smile was gentle. People reveal themselves, my dear. If you watch, you'll heal, and this house will too. As the family dispersed, Luther to his ledgers, Cedric to his paints, Harold to his plans, Lucy and Miss Marple lingered, the fire's glow warming the room. You were right about greed, Miss Marple, Lucy said. Quimper's ambition was his trap. Miss Marple's needles clicked, her voice soft. Ambition blinds Lucy, but truth, like a buried seed, always rises. The night ended with the police gone, Quimper in custody, and Rutherford Hall exhaling its secrets. Lucy, in her attic room, wrote a final note to Miss Marple, though they'd part tomorrow. Quimper's done, thanks to you. Emma's stronger than she knows. I'm ready for a holiday. The railway's whistle, faint through her window, was no longer ominous, but a reminder of a puzzle solved. Miss Marple, in her guest room, knitted on, her mind already drifting to the next thread of human nature, waiting to be unravelled. Chapter 12. The fireside resolved. The fire in Miss Jane Marple's parlour at Daymead Cottage crackled with a comforting warmth, its golden light dancing across the chintz curtains and the polished oak of the tea-table. Outside, the January dusk had settled over St. Mary Mead, the village's thatched roofs dusted with frost, its lanes quiet save for the occasional crunch of a bicycle on the icy path. Miss Marple, her white hair neatly pinned and her shawl draped over her shoulders, sat in her favourite armchair, her knitting needles moving with a rhythm that belied the sharpness of her mind. Across from her, Mrs. Elspeth McGillicuddy, her sturdy frame softened by a woolen cardigan, sipped tea, her eyes wide with a mix of relief and wonder. The events at Rutherford Hall, culminating in Dr. John Quimper's arrest for the murders of Martine Dubois and Alfred Krakenthorpe, had reached their resolution, and Elspeth, the accidental witness to the crime on the 4.50 from Paddington, had returned to hear the tale's end. The parlour, with its familiar clutter of photographs and a single porcelain shepherdess on the mantel, was a haven of calm after the storm of the investigation. Miss Marple had invited Elspeth to stay the night, insisting that the full story pieced together by Lucy Islesborough's courage and her own quiet deductions be shared over tea, away from the tension of the Crackenthorpe estate. The maid, Cherry Baker, had set out a tray of scones and cucumber sandwiches, her cheerful chatter about the village fete ignored as the two women settled into their discussion. Lucy, her role at Rutherford Hall complete, had sent a final letter, promising a visit soon but planning a well-earned holiday in the Cotswolds. Inspector Dermot Craddock, now back in London, had telephoned to confirm Quimper's confession, leaving Miss Marple to tie up the threads for her friend. "Jane, I still can't believe it," Elspeth began, setting her cup down with a clink. Her Scottish burr, usually brisk, was softened by awe. "That one glimpse on the train, those few seconds of horror, and you unravelled it all. A murder hidden in a sarcophagus, and another to cover it. How did you know?" Her hands, roughened by years of practical work, gestured emphatically, her eyes searching Miss Marple's serene face. Miss Marple's smile was faint, her needles pausing as she leaned forward. "Human nature, Elspeth, is much the same everywhere, whether in St. Mary Mead or on a speeding train. Greed, fear, ambition, they leave traces, like footprints in a garden bed. Your story was the seed, and Lucy, bless her, was the soil that let it grow." Her voice, soft but precise, carried the weight of experience, and Elspeth, though no stranger to practicality, marvelled at her friend's quiet brilliance. She began at the beginning, her words measured, weaving the tale without flourish. "Your glimpse on the 4.50 was no dream, Elspeth. You saw a woman strangled, her light hair and fur-trimmed coat vivid in that fleeting moment. The railway officials doubted you, as officials do, but I knew you for a woman of sense. A body, I reasoned, must exist somewhere along the line, likely near Brackhampton, where the tracks skirt Rutherford Hall. The Crackenthorpe estate, with its quarry and woods, offered a hiding place, and Lucy's presence there gave us eyes where the police could not go." Elspeth nodded, her tea cooling as she listened. Lucy was marvellous, wasn't she? So clever, yet she scrubbed floors like any housemaid. "But how did you know it was Quimper?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, her knitting resumed the needles, a soft counterpoint to her narrative. "Quimper's charm was his mask, Elspeth. A doctor, trusted and intimate, has access to a household, to secrets, to means like poison. His attentiveness to Emma Crackenthorpe was too deliberate, his presence too constant. When Lucy found the first scrap in the quarry, matching your description, and later the body in the sarcophagus, it pointed to someone familiar with the estate's hidden corners." She sipped her tea, her gaze distant, reconstructing the puzzle. Martine Dubois was the key. Lucy's inquiries in London and Brackhampton revealed her as a French dancer, sister to Pierre, Emma's wartime lover. Martine blamed Emma for Pierre's death, but her true target, I believe, was Quimper. The photograph in the tin, inscribed, "To JQ with regret," and the burned paper with a French address linked him to her past. Quimper, posing as a doctor, had a history he could not afford to expose. Lucy's discovery of his notebook, with entries about Martine, confirmed he knew her perhaps from Paris, where he claimed to have trained. Elspeth's brow furrowed, her practical mind grappling with the complexity. But why kill her? "Jane, and on a train, of all places. Miss Marple's needles paused again, her voice taking on a gentle gravity. Quimper was bold, Elspeth, and desperate. Martine came to Brackhampton, likely to confront him or Emma, perhaps to expose his fraud or demand payment. He knew she was travelling. Her theatre engagement was public and boarded the 5.15 from Euston. Finding her alone in a compartment, the train speed, the drawn blinds, gave him cover. He strangled her, as you saw, and threw her body into the quarry near Rutherford Hall, a place he knew from his visits. Later, he moved her to the sarcophagus, thinking it forgotten. Elspeth shivered, the memory of that fleeting scene vivid. And Alfred, poor wretch, poisoned in his car. Miss Marple's lips pursed, her eyes narrowing. Alfred was a victim of his own greed. He saw Quimper move the body, or learned of it through his shady connections. The tin Lucy found, with the typed note matching Emma's anonymous letters, suggests he helped Quimper frighten her, hoping to profit. But blackmailers rarely thrive. Quimper, sensing Alfred's weakness, used cyanide obtained by a doctor to silence him, staging it as suicide. The vial was a clumsy touch, but murderers often overreach. Elspeth leaned back, her tea forgotten, and those letters to Emma why scare her. Miss Marple's smile was wry. To bind her. To him, Elspeth Quimper wanted Emma's hand, and through her, the Krakenthorpe fortune. Luther's will, tying the estate to his children, made Emma the prize. By sending those warnings, beware the estate's shadow, he made her feel vulnerable, dependent on his protection. A cruel tactic, but effective, until Lucy's questions stirred Emma's doubts. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney, and Miss Marple adjusted her shawl, her narrative flowing like a stream. Lucy was our strength. Her quarry attacker boulder, deliberately pushed, showed the killer's desperation. Her bait, the forged letter claiming Martine's diary, was the final stroke. Quimper, panicked by the thought of exposure, confessed. In the barn, his ambition laid bare before Emma and Craddock's men. His pastor clerk in Paris, forging papers during the war. Not a doctor was Martine's leverage. She knew him, perhaps through Pierre, and threatened to ruin his carefully built life. Elspeth's eyes widened, her practical soul awed by the intricacy. You saw it all, Jane, from my one glimpse. How do you do it? Miss Marple's laugh was soft, almost mischievous. I see people, Elspeth, as they are. In St. Mary Mead, we have our share of greed and deceit, smaller in scale, but no different. Quimper's charm was like Mrs. Green's at the post office, all smiles until the accounts didn't add up. Martine's vengeance was like young Tommy's, sulking over a lost love. Patterns repeat, and I notice them. Her needles clicked, a steady rhythm as she added, Lucy's courage and Craddock's diligence did the rest. You, Elspeth, gave us the spark. Elspeth shook her head, her awe tinged with relief, and Emma. Poor thing, to trust that man. Miss Marple's expression softened, her voice warm. Emma will heal, Elspeth. She's stronger than she knows, freed from Quimper's shadow. Luther's still a tyrant, but Cedric and Harold will rally, perhaps mend their fractures. The estate, with its secrets aired, may breathe again. She paused, her eyes distant. Lucy's off to the Cotswolds, and well deserved. She wrote of a holiday, but I suspect she find another puzzle she's that sort. Elspeth chuckled, her tension easing. You're a wonder, Jane. The police, the family, even Lucy, They all danced to your tune. Miss Marple's smile was demure, her needles resuming their dance. Nonsense, Elspeth. I merely pointed the way. People revealed themselves, if you watch. Quimper's greed, Alfred's weakness, Martine's pain, they wove their own trap. She set her knitting aside, her hands folding in her lap. Now, tell me about your Christmas shopping. Did you find that scarf for your niece? The shift to the mundane was deliberate, and Elspeth, catching the hint, laughed, recounting her London adventures. The parlour, with its fire and tea, became a haven of ordinary life, the horror of the murders receding like a bad dream. Yet Miss Marple's mind, even as she nodded at Elspeth's tale, lingered on the case. The railway's whistle, faint in her memory, was a reminder of the fleeting moment that had sparked it all, a moment of violence, seen by chance, that had unravelled a web of deceit. The Krakenthorpe fortune, a lure for Quimper's ambition, had nearly undone them, but truth, as she knew, always surfaced, like a seed breaking through winter soil. As Elspeth chatted, Miss Marple's eyes drifted to the fire, her thoughts turning to the wider world. St. Mary Mead, with its gossip and small dramas, was a microcosm of human nature, and she, its quiet observer, found puzzles everywhere. Quimper's downfall, Martine's silenced voice, Alfred's tragic greed. They were stories she'd seen before, in different guises. The photograph, the quarry button, the burned papers, all threads she'd woven into clarity. With Lucy's hands and Craddock's law, she smiled, her heart light, knowing justice had prevailed. Elspeth, finishing her tea, rose to retire, her train to Scotland due tomorrow. You've given me peace, Jane, she said, her hand clasping Miss Marple's. I'll sleep sounder, knowing that woman's killer is caught. Miss Marple's grip was gentle, her voice warm. You did right to tell me, Elspeth. Rest now, and visit soon. As Cherry cleared the tray, Elspeth ascended to the guest room, her steps lighter than they'd been since that fateful train. Alone. Miss Marple picked up her knitting, the needles clicking as the fire dwindled. The case was closed, but her mind, ever restless, drifted to the next puzzle. Perhaps a village squabble, perhaps a letter from Lucy. The world she knew was full of secrets, waiting for her quiet gaze to unravel them. The railway's hum, a distant echo in her memory, faded into the night, and Miss Marple, content, knitted on her parlour, a beacon of calm in a world of hidden truths.